We will call the 26 November meeting of the Manhattan City Commission to order. If you'll please rise and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a work session, so we'll take no votes or legislative action tonight. We'll be talking about the Aggieville upgrade design options. And Jason.
Just wanted to make a few opening comments before Mark Bechamp and Olson take over. This is a very high-level view. On October 23rd, we had a open house, open forum at the pavilion in the park. All the consultants that are here this evening were in attendance that evening, answering a lot of questions of the public, presenting these concepts, and going over the strategies moving forward. It was an hour and a half of good discussion. We had almost 100 people attend that evening and made their way through in that hour and a half period. We wanted to bring this to you all this evening so you could get firsthand updates and presentation from the team. One thing I would like to stress this evening is the importance of us reaching some consensus and getting some feedback and input on 12th Street. 12th Street from Moore to Bluemont, next spring we'll have a water line under construction to serve the hotel. It is an opportunity for us to address the streetscape, the landscaping, the road configuration, the parking. You'll see a couple concepts tonight. We're going to be back in front of the governing body in February on the 11th. It'll be the second Tuesday of that month. When we come back that evening, we're going to need some very specific direction on that segment of roadway. This evening, if you can take a look at those concepts, give us your reactions and your feedback. Obviously, we're not making any decisions. We do need to engage the Commissioner Hattisall and Commissioner Easterbrook on those concepts as well. But we'd like to get some dialogue going on your preferences, possibly what you've heard from others, specifically on 12th Street. There's a lot of information tonight. I think we have close to 60 slides for you, a lot of different topics. But that one in particular, we're trying to move along at a quicker pace in order for us to meet some construction deadlines next spring in association with the hotel. So with that, I will turn it over to Mark, and as you have questions later, I might be able to address those from timeline perspective, but Mark and his team will run through some of those details on all four of those areas this evening.
Thanks, Jason. Mark Bechamp with Olson, and we're glad to be here to talk about Aggieville and what our group, design team, has really worked on for quite a while. And we've got some good slides, good presentations to share with you tonight. We had, to start off today, we actually had our kickoff meeting with McCown Gordon, which is in the room tonight as well. So we met for a couple hours, just talking through the PowerPoint, talking through the begin of the project to start putting costs to the project, and which will be presented to you in February. So we're starting that process early and getting them engaged, and we kind of worked on strategies of what they need from us and what we need from them. So it was really a very, very good, productive meeting. So if I know you're probably going to have questions as you go, but it'd be good if maybe we can get through all the presentation and then maybe kind of handle the questions at the end. And we have as you're aware, we got several groupings of the presentation, and then we'll kind of handle those at the end as far as questions. But we have Kirk Taylor from Walker that will be handling the parking garage itself. And he's done a very good job and given some good concepts with that. Patrick Schaub with BBN is working on the facade of that garage, of what that exterior will look like. Andrew Vidor with Walker is going to be talking about parking management strategy. that is going to be the garage and the surrounding Aggieville area. And then follow up be Ken Boone with our Olson Design Studio. Also, Kelly Thompson's here from the design studio that has done a lot of the work in pulling this together. So I'm going to end there, and I'll probably be back up at the end with some questions and answers, but we'll let them kind of go through the slides here. So.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Kirk Taylor. I'm Director of Design Services, Walker Consultants. And really, I just want to take a few minutes this evening to talk about what we're considering the preferred alternative for the parking structure. I understand there may be some new faces here. So for those of you who might have heard this before, keep me honest, make sure I don't introduce any new information. So right now, this is our preferred alternative. It's what we consider, step back. It's what we consider a two-bay single-thread structure. It's similar to the other parking structure, public parking structure downtown. I won't belabor the number of options we explored, but there were several. When looking at this, we really look at what we call a level of service approach. There's several factors that come into play when we do that. As far as the end user experience, things like parking geometrics, ramp slope, floor to floor heights, and other amenities. Level A service, obviously being the best. C, average. Anything D or less we consider essentially failing, and we usually want to go back and revisit some of that program. This structure here we would consider a B plus for many of those factors that I just mentioned. The grade level, the grade level here sits at the corner of Laramie and Manhattan, with the main entry exit, one single entry exit at the west side of Laramie. With the ramping configuration, as far as a queue analysis, entry exit, ability to access the facility, a single entry exit is more than fine. Single ramp is more than fine, as you can see up here in the top right-hand corner is the isometric. So we're grade +4 supported levels, providing approximately 143,000 total square footage. There's commercial core and shell space programmed along Manhattan. This is a little over 5,000 square feet currently, and there's another little over 4,000 square feet programmed along Laramie. The way this structure is laid out right now, we haven't anchored to a particular structural system. I believe when we come back in February, we're going to provide a matrix, or evaluation matrix, and a recommendation to help with that selection. Fundamentally, both structural systems, designed properly, can perform equally well. There's just several factors to consider as far as delivery, life cycle costs, end user experience, workforce, staging, schedule, that may come into play that would help guide those decisions. One thing we may want to talk about is, just quickly, not to get too technical, it's the location of the stair and elevator cores. Ideally, those are usually located in the corners of structures, essentially because it tends to be underutilized space as far as the parking geometry. For the size of this facility, two stair elevator cores are all that's needed as far as egress and emergency exiting. The main stair elevator core is located here in the northeast corner because of the proximity to the core of Aggieville. It seemed to make sense, and that's a connection to Manhattan Street. As long as the stairs, not to get too technical, as long as the stairs are separated by half the diagonal distance, this still meets code. So currently we have the other stair location located in the southwest corner. That's not to negate the fact that this stair could be relocated or an additional stair added. A third stair is not required, only 2 are needed. So this stair could be located up here in the northwest corner, but it tends to make more sense to have that as activated along Laramie Street.
Excuse me, is there an elevator there also, or did you say?
No, just one elevator up in this northeast corner at Manhattan. Now, that's not to say that a second couldn't be provided. It's just technically not needed. Just quickly going through the typical floor levels. Ground floor level to get over the commercial space is 15 feet. That's going to provide ample clearance for that commercial space. Typical floor to floors is 12 foot. And then the top level, single thread helix. So what we try not to do is get over more than 5.5 complete revolutions to the top level. At that point, we consider that at a negative effect to the end user experience. And with that, I'll architecture talk.
What did you say is 15 feet? Is that the sidewalk? Is that inside the building?
No, I'm sorry, the clear distance, so from the grade level
Yes?
to the first supported level is 15 foot clear.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Maybe before we talk about architecture, maybe this is, to ask a couple of questions. Can you compare this to the size of KSU's parking garage?
Qualitatively, in what sense, as far as square footage?
Yeah, you said
It's
147,000, right?
147,000 square feet, so the KU garage is significantly larger.
Yeah.
This structure, this footprint right now is 120 feet wide, as we've laid it out by 258 feet long. The KU structure, I believe, is at least 4 bays wide. Is it 5?
State?
Yeah, so it's 240 feet. It's as wide as the structure is long. So it's substantially larger.
Yeah. And one of the things we talked about before is clearance to the north between this building, and the existing structure. Is that still gonna be a walkway, or?
Oh, yes. So, and that was one of the reasons, to talk, it's a great question, thank you. One of the reasons that this preferred alternative shook out, we looked at trying to do this as a 3-bay wide structure. So right now, we have an aisle of parking. We were looking at a 3-bay, but what that was resulting in is us building lot line to lot line. We understood there's sensitivity to the proximity of Rally House, and then a desire to activate the space between Rally House and the structure. At the end of the day, the 2-bay structure actually is more efficient. So what that means is we're building less square footage to provide a single parking space. So that's a real advantage. Secondary advantage to that is we feel this is not gonna overbear the sidewalk and soften that presence of the structure, because it will be a fairly large amenity when it's completed. So right now, we do have this alley programmed set back a minimum of 10 feet. I think we were able to get a little wider. We up to 12, with the intent to activate this space and still provide a pedestrian connection between the parking structure and the upper level of the Rally House.
And we'd put all the handicap parking on the first floor, I assume, so the elevator is not a requirement for that.
Currently, we have it uniformly distributed over multiple levels. We've provided the van accessible spaces on the ground floor because they require additional clearance. If there's a desire to relocate that, that's something that would not, being able to locate those all solely on the ground floors is something that can be achieved without adversely affecting the program. So right now, we've identified a few here in the northeast corner, some in the southwest, and then uniformly distributed adjacent to the main stair elevator core on the supported levels. But that's definitely something that can be adjusted if needed or desired.
So Rally House does not go the entire length of the parking structure.
Correct.
So will the parking garage line go the full distance on the north side, or does it switch at any point there to fill in the Rally House? The distance between that walkway
The walkway is going to be uniform.
across, okay, that's what I wondered.
Right here is the Rally House property line.
Okay,
So the parking garage will go from essentially Manhattan Avenue. This is the Burger King property line over here on the west side.
okay,
Right here is Mr. Good Sense, Insomnia, and so forth, right in here. The little alley that goes between them is right in here.
okay. And what is the surface on the walkway? Is it concrete? You're gonna lay concrete between Rally House and the
That-
parking garage?
We'll have the opportunity to talk about that.
Because I
a
don't
few more
necessarily
slides
think
in.
that's landscaping.
Yeah,
I
there's
mean,
more,
that's-
there's more slides coming at the end.
Okay.
And they'll talk about that, activating that space and what it can look like.
And so I don't know when's the right time then to ask my questions. I want to know about,
Anytime
I
is
want to
the
know
right
about drainage. Ordinarily, we require detention pond. It looks to me like we're building property line to property line. So how are we, and maybe you're not the right one, so I can wait and ask that question of somebody else, whoever's supposed to answer.
Well, good. You can ask the question.
Okay.
You got the right people here.
Okay, very
We'll both
good.
talk about it.
Yeah.
Good guess, okay.
When you're looking at the site is a parking lot and impervious already.
Sure,
So we're putting a garage that's impervious.
uh-huh,
So when as far as, there's no water getting in right now, and there's no water when the garage gets there.
okay. So you're putting back what,
We're just
the
filling it back in with a structure.
So we're not increasing the impervious area. So
replacing
co-
nothing with nothing, okay.
So the cover levels will drain to sanitary, this open,
Stormwater,
we'll go to
I'll talk about the stormwater in
all
the
right.
slide.
That's what I want to know about, okay.
It could be inconsequential, but with the exit and the entrance and the exit being on Lamry Street, was any thought put in about improvements, particularly maybe over on 14th that would be needed on that road to handle that additional traffic?
I'll be addressing that later.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to talk, Patrick Schaub with BBN Architects. I'm going to talk a little bit about the development of the facades or the skin of the parking garage and what we're trying to do to make it, it's a very large building that we're placing in Aggieville, and what we're trying to do to mitigate the impact and actually make it a contributing part of the Aggieville streetscape and the district down here. You can see in the slide over here, which is the site plan, we are filling a considerable amount of the site. And Commissioner Morris, you asked about how much of that length of that building. The Rally House ends right here. And this gray area right here is the walkway between the Rally House and the building to the west. So you can see how the pedestrian walkway is about 12 feet wide to this point and then widens out behind the buildings that are built. At least there's space there now. The property line remains straight, but there's space there between the existing buildings. And so this is a view looking from Morrow Street back toward the southwest, where you can see the Rally House building here and the parking garage here. It was noted that we've placed the stair at this corner for a number of reasons. One is to get that entrance exit to the parking garage as close to the heart of Aggieville as we can. It also, having the stairs on that corner and having it glazed gives you some passive surveillance of that stair for security reasons, and also communicates to a person using the parking garage how to communicate vertically when they're outside of it to get back to the level that their car is on. The stairs are easily visible. And we talked a little bit, and I'll go into this a little more, about a connection, potential connection between the garage and the Rally House at the second floor. We've worked out a scheme which can actually provide an overhead walkway that would sort of create an arch over that alley so that you could activate and make that space on the second floor of the Rally House more attractive, because they could get directly to the parking garage from that location. In this particular scheme that we've developed, we're looking at a combination of materials that are found in Aggieville and some that are introducing some new materials. In this particular view, you can see that the darker pieces that go up the equivalent of 2 stories of the parking garage relate to the 2-story prevalent architecture that's along Morrow Street, that 2-story brick architecture. And then above it, when the 3 floors ascend above that level, we're proposing using some sort of perforated screening. One of the important things that we're trying to achieve with this parking garage is to make it naturally ventilated, so that the exhaust from the cars ventilates naturally. We don't have to introduce any mechanical means to get that exhaust out. And so there are limitations by code on what the permeability of the skin of the building needs to be so that we get the adequate amount of ventilation. And so we've designed a skin on those upper floors that can achieve that. Another view then, this is the floor plan of the garage. As we talked about before, the areas in blue would be those that could be utilized for retail space. We think that's an important opportunity we have here to take what is now a surface parking lot and actually activate that portion of the sidewalk with some retail opportunities on the parking garage to, again, sort of reduce the overall bulk and impact of the garage, at the same time enlivening our street, which is something that Aggieville needs, you know, to have those streets enlivened, something that we're after. And the geometry of those spaces allow us to still maximize the amount of parking up here, but and the fact that we're doing that 2-bay structure, as Kirk mentioned, we do have a little additional area on the south where we can get a generous sidewalk along Laramie, some places for potential bicycle parking or activated space, and Ken will talk about that more as we talk about streetscape options there. But it really works well with getting, again, a face on the street level, the pedestrian level, so that people aren't looking at cars in the garage and you don't have that issue. This view is the one we presented at the public presentation that we had in City Park. And again, we're looking at developing the retail space here along North Manhattan Avenue. There'll be some sort of screening here that sort of relates to the facade in this particular scheme of the Rally House. And again, we've got retail along this south toward the south on Laramie. Some of the comments that we've gotten back on this was we'd like to see some more activation of this area of the facade with windows or some more delineation of the building, and we're certainly looking into those. We're at the point now where we're trying to get this far enough along that we can get some prices assigned. One of the most variable aspects of the parking garage, once you've got the geometry set for where the cars need to be in the structural system, the real variable that we're going to be dealing with cost-wise is what we do with the skin and what we can do to make it fit Aggieville as much as possible. So we're at that point now of developing schemes, and as was mentioned in February, we'll be bringing back some more options on how that will all work out. But I'm happy to answer any questions, I guess, now. Since we're meeting.
Sorry. Okay, so this might be further along in the planning stages, but it seems like there's so much glass or whatever material you're using other than glass, but transparent. So who's in charge of maintenance or operations of the garage and keeping it clean or taking
Well,
care of it?
this will be a city-owned facility.
So the city will take care
So the
of
city will be maintaining the
So,
garage.
okay. And that's not in the costs anywhere, at least right now?
The maintenance costs?
Yeah.
Would have to ask Jason if they've done projections on that, but we're looking at the cost of construction, at least of the part
Construction, right.
that we're doing. Now, the first floor down here, where we have the retail space, eventually those would be independent tenants that would have a lease agreement with the city, and that'll work out the maintenance of those spaces. So
Are there cameras everywhere also, or?
that's part of the overall Aggieville security plan to be worked up
Okay.
at some point.
To the cost of the actual structure, I know you can't give us a hard cost and you're still pulling numbers, but am I making up the fact that at one point we were told it was probably going to be around $19 million? Am I imagining that?
Do you remember that number?
That's pretty high. So we had
We had a discussion about how the parking garage was essentially going to be the entire, what the TIF raised. So what was that number?
about 12 million in capacity,
Okay, 12
with about 17 to 20 million in revenue supporting those bonds. So we had estimated a 500 stall garage at roughly $20,000 per stall. 10 to 12 million is what we had provided in the Aggieville Vision Update as an estimate for the garage.
And that's just for the construction of the garage. That wouldn't count the interest in the bonds. Okay.
Correct.
Just a couple of things. I mean, you run into this in any structure that both This doubles as a parking garage and a commercial enterprise, but the deliveries to those businesses, whatever they might be, would come through the front door, I assume. And then, in some cases, they have a dumpster inside that's tucked in there behind the parking stall somewhere.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're still gonna be looking at, is how those will all function. Part of what we're getting was, we're in that spot now where we're trying to work the geometry of the parking with those retail spaces, and now that we've got a good handle on that, we'll be refining those services. We also have to find place for mechanical equipment, switch gear, things like that, so that'll all be worked on.
How deep is the commercial space on North Manhattan Avenue versus Laramie?
The commercial space on North Manhattan Avenue is about 34 feet deep, I believe, as we have it now. The commercial space on Laramie is about 26 feet, 27 feet inside.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick, appreciate it.
Mayor Dodson, good evening. Commissioners, good evening. Staff, thanks for having me here again tonight. It's good to see you all. Wanted to talk about actually managing parking in Aggieville and why it's critical to the success of building structured parking, improving the streetscape, and growing Aggieville in whole. So I want to talk about why it should be managed, what's being managed now in Aggieville, as well as some recommendations in a phased approach to moving forward with some other parking management plans. So the importance of managing parking in Aggieville comes in a couple different benefits. The first is the customers that are coming into Aggieville to shop, to dine, to come see different businesses. And we want to make sure that we're able to provide them good access. We want to provide them both short-term parking options and long-term parking options. When we talk about short-term parking options, we talk about managing the on-street parking and creating turnover for the people that are coming to the donut shop in the morning, to just come in and out in 15 minutes, to grabbing a bite to eat at lunch or in the evening, but then also providing options for longer term parking stays for customers and visitors of Aggieville, primarily anticipated in currently today the surface parking lots, but in the future the surface parking lot and the parking garage. But we also need to provide good access and convenience to the employees of Aggieville, because they're critical to the success and the function of Aggieville and bringing the customers into this area of Manhattan. So that means providing them reliable, equitable, and consistent parking, so they understand when they come to work every day, whether it's for a couple hours or it's for an 8 or 10 hour shift, they know what to expect and they have access for them as well. And that's the way we do that, is by establishing consistent and regular enforcement practices in order to amend user behaviors. And those user behaviors are the parkers, and that includes not only the employees but the customers. So we want to begin to teach new habits, and new policies and strategies can help inform those habits for predictability and consistency and reliability. So currently today, there are parking restrictions in Aggieville, the surrounding neighborhoods, as well as the park and at K-State. The areas shown in the teal are currently free and unlimited. They're also all on-street parking assets. The parking lots in Aggieville are shown in purple. Those are currently 3-hour limited. The park has unrestricted parking, and as you know, the university has paid parking strategy. The north side of Aggieville and also the east side of campus has some parking restrictions to limit some of the parking overnight. So parking is today currently enforced, albeit on a limited basis. The resources that are assigned to parking enforcement are through the police department, which have in most cases higher and better uses of their time for policing and keeping the community safe than enforcing parking restrictions. There's also a parking enforcement officer who has a large area to cover, not only in Aggieville, the surrounding portions in the neighborhoods, but in downtown Manhattan. The result of the resources being limited today makes it difficult for parking to be enforced actively and regularly. And so if enforcement doesn't occur actively and regularly, the behaviors and the rules are not followed. So what we see is that the parking on street in the teal areas turns into long-term parking, which is not the intent of those resources. And if you know that you're likely to not get a ticket in the areas that are enforced, you're likely to abuse the time limits and thus not create turnover. We also know that parking in City Park currently is not regulated. Anecdotally, we're aware that there are probably people parking in City Park that are going to K-State, both faculty, staff, and students, so it's a mix of all those different users. It's likely happening in Aggieville as a result of Aggieville being free currently, and in most cases, plenty of unlimited time parking. So you can easily park there and then walk north to campus, which makes it difficult for the customers and the employees to access the parking resources in Aggieville. And then most of the neighborhoods, with the exception of a few areas, currently have very little in the way of restrictions. It's important to set the stage moving forward. During the hotel construction, parking garage construction, and streetscape construction, there will very much be a loss in parking supply in Aggieville. It totals about 40 physical spaces, but because the parking is distributed amongst various parking lots, various on-street resources, there could be a effective capacity loss of about 100 spaces. So that 100 spaces means that it might be difficult to find the last few spaces because you've got to circle a couple different blocks, you have a couple different parking lots. And as a result of that, we recognize that there very well could be, in certain times of the day, spillover parking into the adjacent neighborhoods in Aggieville. So we want to be clear and transparent with that in our strategies. We want to be able to create the least amount of pain as possible to the business owners in Aggieville, the adjacent residents, the customers, and the employees. So we've developed a multi-phased parking management strategy for Aggieville and the adjacent areas. Again, those strategies are intended to reduce spillover into the neighborhoods for long-term parking. It's intended to reduce spillover from K-State University. It's intended to increase on-street parking turnover, i.e. making on-street parking intended to be for short-term parking and off-street parking long-term parking. And we really want to minimize the impact of construction. And ultimately, the Phase 1 parking management plan sets the stage for a future parking management plan by implementing new strategies, teaching people the new policies and strategies in a non-threatening way. So as we move into a long-term parking management strategy, people have learned the new rules, so to speak, and we've made it easy. So we do that by establishing consistent and regular enforcement, enforcing those policies, enforcing time limits and turnover. And that's done through teaching and education, but that's also done through penalization by not following the rules after you've been taught the new rules. We also want to make sure that we're addressing the employees and the residents' needs. That's the residents within the Aggieville boundary, but also the residents in the surrounding neighborhood and not impacting them along the way. We do that by implementing an employee parking permit program. So that would be something that's new in Aggieville, whereas an employee of Aggieville would be provided a permit in similar case to the residential permit program on the north side of Aggieville. That's the zone colored stickers that you currently have. And that's to make sure that they have a place to park that's convenient for them and addresses the certain work hours that they have. So if you're working an early morning shift, you have access that's close in to Aggieville. But also if you're working a late night shift, we don't want you having to walk an unreasonable distance or into an area that is maybe not close and accessible for you as an employee. So we want to provide that so they have reliability and predictability in where they go depending on their job type, but also providing the residents that are within the Aggieville boundaries access to long-term parking, but also the residents that are outside the Aggieville district in the surrounding neighborhoods to not impede them from having access to their homes. So setting the stage for that, this map shows the initial modifications and initial parking management policies that we're recommending at this point. The areas with the orange construction cones show the hotel site, the parking garage construction site, the construction on Morrow and 12th Street for the streetscape improvements. This shows the area of yellow with the black check marks as employee parking permit zones. So you would be exempt as an employee or exempt as a resident from parking time limits in those areas through some sort of decal or other virtual permit. It also extends during the construction phase two things. The areas in yellow are shown as an extended time limit. So we're showing those as 3-hour time limits. So we're increasing the time limits now that are currently 2 hours to 3 hours, but also implementing time limits in new areas, particularly surrounding the Aggieville boundaries into the neighborhoods to make sure that we're not negatively impacting the residents for long-term parking. We're recommending implementing time-limited parking initially on the north side of the park in order to reduce spillover from K-State and move the K-State parkers back onto campus, but also setting a time limit that doesn't negatively impact you from visiting the park to throw a baseball, to play frisbee. You'll also notice that those time limits are not on the south end of the park where the pool is. So people that are there for a longer period of time are not going to be negatively impacted as well. Again, lastly, I think it's important to recognize that the employee and residential permit program is there to not negatively impact the residents and employees of Aggieville by providing them consistency and reliability. Long term, we still want to make sure that we're providing parking options for all users. So again, that's business owners, that's employees, that's residents, that is customers of Aggieville. We do that by continuing the consistent and regular enforcement. So we're carrying over these strategies from phase one. We've begun to regularly enforce the policies and the time limits and the procedures. We continue with the employee and the residential parking permit program. In this case, in the long-term strategy, as you'll see in the map in the following slide, those move to some areas that were previously on street during construction into the parking garage and into the parking lot. So they have a place that's reliable and consistent for them. There's an opportunity to make that fee-based. We'll talk about fees in a second and talk about paid parking, but that could be a fee-based system in order to provide access. There's also an opportunity to implement paid parking Aggieville-wide. That includes on-street, but it also includes the parking lot and the parking garage. The idea of paid parking in Aggieville primarily is to help support the ongoing operational costs of a parking management program and parking management strategy, to provide good access to customers, to provide access to employees and residents and business owners. And this is primarily intended to be a user-based fee rather than relying on the general fund. So the users that come into Aggieville would be paying for the operation and access to that, rather than having to rely on the general fund for users that don't come into Aggieville to carry that burden. That carries some similar continuity with the strategy at the airport, whereas it's a user fee system rather than a general fund paid system to support the ongoing costs. The map here shows some changes, and I'll walk you through them. It changes on the north end of the park. Remember we talked about going from currently no restrictions to 3-hour restrictions, and then move it back down to 2 hours in the final programming phase. Still allows you convenient access if you're a park user, but also prohibits the park from being a long-term parking strategy, not only for K-State faculty, staff, and residents, but also for employees. So we're providing good access to the park for park users primarily. We're moving the 3-hour on-street parking back to 2 hours and implementing paid parking. Again, we're encouraging parking turnover for short-term stays and providing long-term access to parking off-street in an unlimited capacity. So you can park there 24/7 if you so choose, because those are your resources to use for long-term parking. All of those areas within the Aggieville boundary would be paid. The rates variable, the rates not set or determined at this point. But we're also continuing to encourage, now that there is approximately 300 more parking spaces in Aggieville, restricting the areas adjacent to Aggieville, the residents in the neighborhoods, restricting the parking time limits as to not have spillover into the neighborhoods for all the Aggieville users. At the same time, exempting those residents in the neighborhoods access to park on their streets without any restrictions. So we talk about how we do this. A lot of cities have parking enforcement officers, meter maids, terms that are kind of not viewed well by the residents and by the citizens. They come off as mean and enforcing. We prefer to use the strategy of parking ambassadors. While they will enforce the parking within Aggieville and the adjacent areas, it frees up the resources of the police department to work on the important things of policing and keeping the community safe rather than enforcing parking. So this would be a staff level, city staff program. They're there to educate and assist customers. You know, primarily we want Aggieville to be an inviting and friendly place, which is why the restrictions and policies are not penalization based immediately. So we can teach the customers, we can teach the employees the new strategies and the new policies through education and warnings before citations and fines. They also are trained in conflict resolution, so they are able to de-escalate confrontation for parkers that are mad that they have new policies and procedures. They also know about Aggieville, so they're trained on events. They know where the businesses are. They're there to help people find where they're going. They wear friendly uniforms, not badges that say, you know, I'm here to write you a ticket, but I'm here to help you. But also at the end of the day, their job is to make sure that they're enforcing the parking and enforcing the time limits. And at a certain point, if you continue to be a habitual and repeat offender, you'll receive a citation. So there's ongoing operation costs to do that, which is where a paid parking strategy can support that. We're estimating about a $300,000 ongoing annual cost to enforce and manage parking, which is why paid parking is one of the strategies that can be used as a user-based fee to help support those costs. So paying for parking can be done a few ways. We all know that parking at the airport will become paid later next fall. Paying for parking on street can be done a couple of different ways, really convenient. The two images on the left are a couple of parking meters. They're multi-space meters. So rather than having an individual meter on each parking space, you would have a group of these located, one generally on each block face. They accept credit cards, they accept coins, they accept variable time durations. So if you only want to stay for a half an hour, you can only pay for a half an hour. If you want to stay for the max 2 hours, you can just pay for the 2 hours. There's also other convenient ways for frequent parkers to Aggieville to pay through applications on their phone. The example we're showing here is pay by phone. There's others. K-State is going to be rolling out a parking app called Park Mobile here in 2020. There's an opportunity to use that same vendor if you so choose for consistency across Manhattan. So every parker has the same parking experience, whether they go to Aggieville, K-State, or the airport, and using that smartphone application. That can be used to pay for parking both on and off street. Moving into the garage and the parking lots, these images are representative of the equipment that is contracted for use at the airport with the parking lot improvements. For consistency's sake, across Manhattan, our recommendation would be to use the same equipment. So there's consistency and predictability and reliability. We're starting to see a trend with that for the parking experience. This allows the users to pay with cash, coin, credit card, or their smartphone application if they so choose to make their parking experience and their payment experience what they want and at their own convenience. These systems also allow for validations. So if a particular business in Aggieville chooses to validate and pay a customer's user fee, they can do that through a number of ways, with a validation ticket, with a smartphone app, with a text that goes to their phone, a number of strategies. But there's opportunities to promote that with Aggieville-wide, through the Aggieville Business Association or on an individual basis. So if a particular business chooses to pay those user fees for the parker, they can do that as well. So that's our preliminary parking management strategy, moving from a largely unmanaged and unenforced system and transitioning that approach through teaching and behavior changes to an ultimate parking management strategy that provides access to all users in Aggieville with reliability and consistency.
So I have a few questions for you. You said, I don't know, it's just so complex for all the parking fees and 2 hours and 3 hours and here and there and everything of that sort. Coming back to this ambassador, okay, and that's going to be staffed by the city. Is that 2 or 3 people?
So Commissioner Reddy, that's a good question. This could be done by city staff. It could also be contracted out through a third-party parking operator. It would require between 2 and 3 FTEs, so that could be more than 2 or 3 people, but full-time employees in order to make sure that the hours of enforcement and the days of enforcement are consistent with the needs in Aggieville.
Okay, and if they are contracted out, or even if you said they are different than police officers, would they also be carrying a gun or anything of that sort? If they're working with people about parking, sometimes you just never know.
So one of the most important parts of parking ambassador and parking enforcement officer, if you want to use that name, is that they're trained in conflict resolution in order to be able to de-escalate situations whereas there is some sort of conflict. Ultimately, it would be up to the city whether or not you would want those individuals to be sworn officers in order to be able to do other policing activities. You don't have to. If you so choose to, you could. There's also the, easy access to the police department within the surrounding area if the conflict is, too escalated.
Well, I think it's a very, sometimes people are very impulsive in those moments. You may not have a chance to call an officer if you're the one who's telling somebody they shouldn't be doing something, or if you're trying to enforce some of those laws, especially in an area such as the Aggieville Business District. So I just want to have more information about that. You said to keep the equipment kind of consistent as to what's at the airport and such. How much do each of those machines cost?
So we're not quite to the point, because these are still preliminary parking management strategies, to be able to have the capital costs for you this evening. It's the intent at the February meeting that we'll have all those capital costs available to you.
And if an employer was going to validate, whether it's an employee's ticket or whatever it might be for their parking fees, I think that would be important to know, to see how much that would cost them. And I would think that's probably built into the type of equipment we're going to be using also. Or is there already a set fee of $15 or something? I don't know.
So those are all items that we're still working on and in the process of. Again, these are preliminary parking management strategies, and the feedback that we receive for you tonight will help us be able to answer those additional questions. And so those operational cost needs and how much you would charge for parking is a function of whether or not you want to have 100% recovery on the parking management strategy, meaning that it costs X amount of dollars a year to operate, in this case around $300,000, to what those parking fees might have to be to support that fully, or at some other partially subsidized rate through other funding sources?
Well, some of that's important because in order to make some of those decisions, I would hate to give a go-ahead for certain things in the plans we are looking at tonight without knowing those types of costs. I feel like we would be obligating ourselves or committing to it, because all of it's great. What you presented is great, but there's all of these qualifier questions which add to that pricing of it, and if it is equitable for us or not. Certainly, we want to have some kind of a way to manage it by some type of parking fees and such, but that's going to depend on how much all of this is going to cost. We certainly don't want to charge somebody $15 or $20 to shop for a couple of hours in Aggieville. That might be cost prohibitive for a lot of people. So those are some things I would like a little. The information you gave is really great, but the cost is what's kind of going to be some of our decision makers here this evening. And if you're talking about 3 or 4 more employees, that adds to that operational cost as well. So.
This might be a little bit of a loaded question, but just out of curiosity with your experience and working with other communities, I understand the concern to try to decrease the amount of overflow parking that's happening in City Park right now, especially on the weekends on a Friday or Saturday night. But one of the things that I always consider when we start to talk about that is how can we set up parking management strategies that have the outcomes we want, but also make sure that we're not encouraging people to potentially make the decision to drink and drive. And one of the things that concerns me about how our long-term setup is to me, with that green area being no parking from 2 a.m. to 9 a.m., you as someone who may go frequent the bars would maybe park at City Park, say, I'm not going to pay for the parking garage. You go to one of the establishments saying, I'll leave before 2 a.m., and then you get in your car and make the unfortunate choice to drive home. So why was 2 a.m. picked? And then my follow-up question is just, with other communities that you worked with, how have they kind of grappled with these problems?
Sure, good question. One of the things that we've talked about in the past during the Aggieville plan update was right-sizing the parking in Aggieville. And right-sizing the parking has more to do with not building too much parking, but also not building enough. So one option, would have been, rather than building 450 parking spaces, we could have built, I'll just say 300, right? So that's much less, 150 less. The result of that is spillover parking into the areas outside of Aggieville, the neighborhoods, the park, the spillover that's coming from K-State. So we settled on, that 450 to 500 number a while back in order to provide the right amount of parking so that Aggieville can, in all the uses within Aggieville, whether that's a restaurant, a bar, a donut shop, or retail shop, can be supported within those limits and not negatively impact the area that's outside of that. Most communities choose to right-size their parking rather than overbuilding or underbuilding. Overbuilding has obviously more capital costs. It has more long-term O&M costs. The TIF rates have to be able to support overbuilding parking that sits empty all the time. But again, underbuilding parking has, underserving the needs of consistency and reliability for all those user groups. So that's kind of why we've established, Commissioner, the size of the parking structure, but also the parking management strategies that follow in order to make sure that the right size parking is used the right way and that we're not negatively impacting the neighborhoods in the adjacent areas when there's adequate parking within Aggieville to support that.
So then I guess my response to that is that I would preferably like to see that green no parking sooner than 2 a.m. Because it almost doesn't matter what the size of the parking you have in Aggieville is on a Friday or Saturday night. If I want to avoid costs, I'm just going to go and park in the park if I know the cutoff's at 2 a.m. So I think it'd make more sense to have that cutoff be at maybe midnight, so that me knowing I'm going to be maybe at the bars later than midnight, I just go ahead and pay for parking at the parking garage or take an Uber or a Lyft. So I want us to think about that the whole time that we're thinking about this. I know the bar part of Aggieville is not the entirety of Aggieville, but it's a really important aspect when it comes to public health and making sure that people get home safely. And so I want to make sure that we're considering all those aspects when we make a plan like this.
Maybe a couple of things. This is going to be, as we go through these phases, which I'm glad you addressed, because when we've talked about this before, with all the construction going on and the absence of the parking lots during that construction, we've said that one of our goals was evacuating the north end of that park. And we're willing to live with that for a while until we get the parking garage done. Then obviously your phasing pulls all that back, which I think is a good idea, and we'll need to consider what you just discussed about timing and things. We can do that at some point. Then we've got education of the public. We've got signage, temporary signage that, although I'm not a fan of signs at all, we're gonna have to exercise some temporary signs, I'm sure, to make sure the citizens are aware. The other thing is I'm not keen on parking ambassadors. I think that's an expense we can do without. Any fees collected out of that garage, let's just say if we've got 450 parking spaces and we turn them over twice a day and we do it at 70%, in other words, you only have 70% of those parking spaces occupied, they turn twice a day, $2 for the use of that for 2 or 3 hours or whatever it is, you're pulling in $400,000 or so. So I'd like to see that go towards paying for the cost of the equipment and the cost of the bond, if we can do that. I mean, that's kind of the same approach we're taking on the airport. I think that's a good one. We're trying to keep any of this off the books of the general fund, so, or property tax or anything else. So to the extent we can use those fees for those purposes, I think is a good idea.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, Mayor Dodson, and, you know, Commissioner Reddy. I think there's some similarities in the comments there, and it is under our responsibility to be able to provide some additional costing information in terms of ROI with the, not only the operational cost, but the capital recovery cost of that equipment as well. So we'll have that available and ready for you in February.
Yeah, I agree with what the mayor said. I think, you know, this thing's got to pay for itself and then produce some revenue to subsidize what we're doing. And so the parking ambassador, I don't know if I'm, you know, in that. I get the idea, you know, be nice to the people, but, you know, we've got people now that give tickets. I also think we should raise our fines. That hasn't been mentioned. I've said that before, you know, because our fines are what, $15? I think KSU's are close to 50. And that's one of the reasons you have students park where we're at instead of using K-State. And so we just need to make it equal. Let's make it consistent, you know, from that standpoint. And I also agree with what Commissioner McKee said. You know, if we're trying to keep people from parking in City Park, we probably should close that at midnight. That would be a good time frame to say after midnight you can't park there. And then that addresses the issue of somebody's gonna drink too much, shows up there at 2. You know, there's people that come late. I think that's probably a good idea, because City Park has become that, you know, sort of flow over, and people park their cars there for days on end, and we need to terminate that. So I think that was a good suggestion.
One more thing, is there a place for shared, I don't know, shared drivers like Uber or Lyft or anything, a designated area where they can come and pick up whoever it is that wants to get picked up? Is there an area designated for that?
So at the moment, Aggieville does not have, under my understanding, a designated location. It's currently set up that if you're on any street corner or in mid-block corner in front of any business, you could get picked up there or get dropped off there. Regulating that is typically done through the city and working with those transportation network companies to set up those regulations and policies.
Because I can see where that might be used even more if the fees are too cost prohibitive for some of these individuals, especially if it's a parking garage in 2 or 3 hours. They might stay for 5 or 6 hours, which is exactly what we want. We want them to enjoy the Aggieville Business District, but then they may just use Uber because it may be a little cheaper, and then they don't have to worry about driving home intoxicated or under the influence. So I don't know, I'm sure that must have been taken into consideration as you were discussing all these fee structures and management plans. our area of Aggieville is not as vast as it is in some other cities. So I want us to make sure it's best fit for our community and not just what typically is a template for another community that might be similar. We are very close. We are trying to build that urban core area so people have more access by walking and riding their bikes or however it might be. So I just want to be sure when we talk about parking fees and permits and such, even for employees, that we are thinking around the same realm as a best fit for Manhattan and for the Aggieville Business District.
We, when we approved the parking lot construction and funding for the airport, we tied the revenue that would be gained from the parking to pay for the construction over time. And so you're comparing this to the airport parking. And so I'd like to have you or Jason just discuss the funding, because it sounded to me like you proposed to use the revenue from the garage to pay for the parking management system, but not pay for the parking garage. So I'd like to have you discuss that, please.
Andrew can jump in here. So I think what he's been trying to describe, there's costs associated with us going to paid parking in Aggieville. This is not only in the garage, this is everywhere. So your fines are really for violators because they are either paying to be there or they're in violation of our new rules. The garage itself has its own management system. The gates that go up and down, tickets you get to go in and out, whether they're electronic or paper or however we're gonna deal with that. There's a cost associated with just running the garage. Then there's a cost associated with running parking management throughout Aggieville. They are different. And we're talking about ambassadors or parking attendants literally on our streets, much like they are today, monitoring the situation. It's different in the garage. You get in, you get a ticket, you've all been in them, you get out, you pay. You don't necessarily have to man that. So that system has its own set of revenue that is tied specifically to the garage. There's another set of revenue out there for the management plan for the whole district. So until we actually get some more specifics from Andrew and Walker, it's hard to combine those two and have a real fruitful conversation.
In all fairness, though, even the automated system, though, you're going to have to hire somebody. Like, I just left the Wichita airport at 11:30 at night last week and got stuck, and the gate wouldn't open. So I had to buzz an attendant to come. Sure. And so there was somebody, it was only one person, and they were probably covering the entire airport that late at night. But, I mean, there's still going to be some level of personnel cost probably even to maintain that system.
And I didn't say there wouldn't be. It'll just be, it could be separate for the garage than the rest of the management going through Aggieville. We have a lot of decisions to make as to when we're going to charge people to be in Aggieville. If it's a 24/7 type operation, we obviously might be looking at more FTEs to do that. Right now, you're 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. We have 2 parking attendants that serve both Aggieville and downtown. This is a major shift. There's also opportunity with it. Think about the times Aggieville is busy. That's not 8 to 5 Monday through Friday unless it's noon hour for lunch. It's a lot of evenings and weekends where Aggieville gets a lot of its visitors. And taking advantage of that or allowing for certain rates to differ by day, by time of day, and by the frequency, and just in terms of whether you're an employee, whether you're a resident, whether you're there for the weekend. I mean, when we went up to Lincoln and when we've traveled to Lawrence, we've seen some really good examples. And I know Manhattan's unique and we need to figure out our plan for Manhattan, but there's some strategies in both those communities that I think we should pay attention to. It's something that I think Andrew will be bringing back when we finally get into the financial data in February. But until then, it's kind of hard to answer your question, Commissioner. There's a debt service on the garage that we absolutely need to get into. But there's a revenue stream there too, and it's just hard to guess right now what that'll be.
When we were up in Lincoln, they had mini parking garages downtown on whatever street that was, I can't remember, but, and then they had on-street parking with meters that were electronically controlled, so you could use your card or whatever you wanted to do there and set the time, and that seemed to be, although there were a couple of meters, as I recall, walking down the street that needed repair, but by and large, you know, it seemed to be working pretty well. And, but I think this question of putting these kinds of devices down inside Aggieville, as you just described, is separate from the parking garage. I think we kind of agreed on what that parking garage needed to look like and how it needed to operate. This idea of street parking control is a little bit new to me, at least, so. But a good thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, and largely, again, the idea of having that paid is to be able to offset some of those operating costs.
Right.
Either partially or fully. The amounts, again, you know, is something that's still a work in progress that we intend to have ready for more in-depth discussion in February.
I think generally I would support a consistent equipment usage, and you know, I hate always to let someone else dictate what equipment we're going to use, but I think that for the welfare of the community at large, I think having one consistent payment and usage is it would be the best way to proceed, just on that point anyway. Makes sense, and expectation-wise by the public. I know that we have to solve the parking issues that in Aggieville, and it's going to be, and the construction's going to take how long, Jason? 18 months, 2 years, what is it?
For the garage itself?
Yep,
Yeah,
Till it-
once we get started, it'll take a good 12 months.
12 months, okay. So we have to come up with a plan, and you know, I don't like everything about this either. I don't like throwing parking out into neighborhoods, and you know, that was one of my concerns initially, and gave you a lot of trouble about it, as I recall. And I don't want to use the park. I want us as a commission to commit to returning City Park to its natural state when this whole thing is over, and we can consider that the parking issues in Aggieville will be solved by then, and we can return our park to that natural use. And but I am concerned, I have been concerned about overnight parking in City Park. I'm more concerned about it when a commercial entity starts parking there, and we have no rules that says they can't. And I want a commercial entity to have to accommodate their needs and not solve it by using public property. I mean, all we need are 40 buses in City Park. Right now, we only have one private bus.
Can I make a comment on, you know, the parking in City Park? That's part of the master plan. We're not planning on closing that parking lot. I mean, that's always going to be there. It's not going to be turned back to grass. I mean, you know, we have a master plan for the park, and it included that parking, and that's going to stay there. So I don't think, you know, that makes any sense on this. Of course, we should plan on the parking, and that's why the idea of cutting it off at midnight is a good idea. But that parking lot's not ever going away in my mind, not based on the master planning that we've done. Is that correct?
The Central Park Road is about the only thing that I've
Right.
seen in the master plan that would change.
Yeah, but the parking's not going to. Just want to be sure that, you know, he's aware of that.
The scope has already crept on City Park from the original
And
ideas.
just to address your comments, Commissioner Morris, this process where he has it in the initial modifications during construction will require us to pass one, if not multiple ordinances in order to make these changes.
Absolutely.
When we open this up and we start regulating the park, and we start regulating the streets, that's the opportunity for us all to talk about how we want to regulate the park and how we want to regulate the side streets. Because the way we've proposed it, we have to get into the park regulations, which is a separate ordinance than regulating parking within our side streets. So that's been our delay until this point, and until we're moving forward here in the next 3 to 6 months, is try to get a comprehensive approach to address both. So we're not just shoving parking one way and shoving it another. This is a comprehensive approach in the interim. And as Andrew pointed out, trying to get then our employees and our residents in Aggieville kind of trained into this. This is shifting. This is going to change even more so when we're done with the garage. So, but we'll have a lot of discussion over ordinances that'll actually change the use of the park and change the use of those side streets.
Absolutely.
One initial thing, additional thing that I'll add, when I was reading this, and this is true for me with Aggieville as a whole, maybe we don't like to think about it this way, but to me, I really struggle on how we should approach paid parking and parking in general in Aggieville, because it has two kind of distinct uses. There's the uses during the day, and then there's the uses at night. And especially when it comes to the long-term modifications that we had on parking, paying for parking on Morrow or Laramie during the day doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because it's never filled during the day. And so to me, especially as a resident, that comes off, you're just trying to generate revenue, where ultimately the goal is to turn over spaces. So, but at night, on the other hand, I could totally understand why you would want paid parking on those streets. So I think that's the thing that I struggle with a little bit, is paid parking to me doesn't make sense at all during the day and could potentially hurt the businesses that are there. At night, it makes total sense, and I think helps create and turn over spaces. So,
Couple observations, and even our data supports between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., Aggieville fills up.
I go to Aggieville lunch all the time. I have never, ever one time.
It's not a matter
Not
of
found a parking
struggle to
spot.
find parking, but it does occupy itself. I mean, we have data, and I think there are folks in the room that can speak to this probably greater than we could. They're there every day. Mornings even on Morrow are starting to fill up, because we know we're going to have to close the alley between 12th and North Manhattan behind Morrow when Bluemont Hotel and the hotel along Bluemont reaches a point. We've got some alley work we know we're going to need to close. We've been watching Morrow, and Dennis Cook has been watching Morrow. Morrow fills up in the morning quicker than most of us realize. And they're going into Bluestem, they're going into businesses, and it's interesting to watch. It's seasonal. I won't argue with you there, Jared. There are times of the year it's not, but there are times of the year it is. And we also need to think about not only Aggieville today, but Aggieville in the future. And as we put these things in place, much like building the garage is a catalyst for what is to come, we need to put regulations in place for what we anticipate coming in the future. It's very hard to predict is when Aggieville is necessarily going to be full and when it's not. But I hear a lot of feedback about lunch crowds. And the fact that we've taken Laramie and made it 2 hour. I just drove by this afternoon, looked down Laramie Street. They're in the car on Laramie because we converted it to 2 hour last October. Or before October, I'd look down Laramie. The thing's full of cars because they can sit there and not get ticketed.
yeah.
So,
And I think that's fair. And to me, I wouldn't argue about the limit on time. It's simply the paid part, because
sure.
I think all of those points are fair. I guess what I would say is just proceed with caution, because just thinking about a consumer and what I do, I think that if I had to pay for parking in Aggieville for lunch, I would make a different lunch decision, honestly. And so, because I didn't want to pay for the 2 hour parking, that doesn't mean that I don't think it shouldn't be 2 hour parking. It just, if the goal here is generating revenue, then have paid parking. But if the goal is better parking management, then I don't understand why we would have paid parking on the street. I guess that's my point. But
So
I understand what you're saying.
The goal of paid parking is one option to help support actively managed parking in order to provide reliability, consistency, and expected outcomes for individual parker, regardless if you're a customer visiting for lunch or you're an employee working there to support the customers, there's a cost to managing parking. And so paid parking is one strategy to help pay for that ongoing operating cost. If there's no parking that's managed in Aggieville, there's no cost associated with it. The challenge with not managing parking in Aggieville is that we're not supporting the goals and objectives of allowing Aggieville to thrive through predictability and having a place to park regardless of who you are parking.
Have you ever been anywhere where parking costs at certain times? Like maybe at night it costs, but during the day it didn't.
Yeah, there's a number of communities that do it differently. It ultimately comes down to what the city's policy is on that. At the end of the day, a parking resource on street or off street, pick a space, has an opportunity cost to it. And it costs something to operate it, to maintain it, regardless of what time of day it's used. And so the policy decision becomes, do we want to charge one user group during a certain period of time a day to only recover the cost of operating that? Or do we want to charge everybody so there's some consistency and one user group is not being treated differently than another?
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I totally understand those points, and I think those are good ways to look at it. I just, for some reason, cannot get it out of my head that paid parking during the day is like, it's almost punitive and like this self-fulfilling prophecy that we need it to manage the parking. And for some reason, I have trouble getting over that a little bit, especially for the day crowd, but I understand the points that you're making, so.
I appreciate all the comments and the questions, and I will just make a comment about parking in general in Manhattan. Downtown and Aggieville have wrestled with parking every year I've ever worked for the city. For the last 20 years, I've been engaged with downtown and Aggieville on this topic every 3 to 4 years with suggestions and ordinance changes and costs associated with them. There are as many opinions about parking in both of those districts as there are businesses and the people that work there. Strong opinions. Just this week, or last week, I was at a meeting downtown, a retailer very upset that somebody had been there 3 hours shopping and got a ticket. Very upset. Philosophically, I think I could probably talk with that individual at a different point in time, and they would agree they like to see their parking turn over, or they don't want their employee or something, the neighbor's employee to park right in front of their business. But the example of somebody being there for 3 hours and spending $500 and getting a ticket, we have got to stop that. Those are difficult. Those are extremely difficult things to address, but it just speaks to the complexity of parking, paid, unpaid, managed, unmanaged, and what you want as a community for the resource that you have. We all travel to places where we pay for parking blindly because we're going there. It's a destination. I'm going to an event, I'm going to wherever it is, I'm going to pay for parking. Hell, we do it at K-State for football games. We just drive into the parking lot, you pay, or basketball. It's just inherent in what you do. You don't see people parking, some do. I mean, the neighborhoods fill up, but the parking lots are full of people who have paid to park there for a reason. This is a shift. This is a shift for our community, and it's a shift for this district, and it is going to be heavily debated. We're just cracking the surface now with options, and we're going to get a lot of feedback. And we've got 36 more slides to cover, so I'd really like to move on if that's all right with you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to add one more thing to it. I do agree with Commissioner McKee in the sense that, we need to compare Aggieville to Manhattan and this community. So when I do go for lunch or whatever I do, I usually end up at Blue Stem. But I don't think about the cost of parking. And sometimes I'm there 1 hour, sometimes I'm there 3 hours. But if there is a cost to my parking, other than the 2 hours free, if there was 2 hours free, that would be different. But if you constantly have to think about the parking portion, there are many other places in Manhattan I can go to and eat. And I might change my own behavior because of it. I see students there all the time that are having meetings, and that's what a vibrant college town should look like without having to worry about running out and worrying about parking all of the time. So I do have that same concern about day parking and evening parking. And I think when we have sporting events, any events coming, it seems appropriate to have some kind of a parking fee structure. But the reason to have parking was for the businesses to be successful. What I don't want to happen because of parking is not to have enough business competition and not a lot of people walking through those businesses.
And there's our balance, Yusha, with investing $30 million in a district. And do we expect anything in return to manage that district from a parking perspective? If we don't, we'll put $30 million in infrastructure down there and not manage it. I don't think the businesses would actually appreciate that, given 30,000 people live within a mile and a quarter of that thing, and they could fill it up at any instant for any particular reason, and the management of that parking go by the wayside. So we have to find a balance.
We have to find a way to pay for it, and there's also a lot of sales tax initiatives that we still have to talk about in the future.
Sure.
This can't be all dependent on one facet of how to collect revenue, and I don't want it to be so cost prohibitive, $5, $10, $15, but nobody wants to go to Aggieville anymore.
Yeah, and I think when we look at other areas and how successful they've been, and the fact that they do charge, there are reasons people go to those areas, and we have to create and maintain that attractiveness of Aggieville in order to get those individuals to come there. A lot of what we're doing isn't necessarily, and I don't want to offend anybody, but this isn't for the person going to lunch on Tuesday. A lot of what we're doing is to keep tens of thousands of people coming to this community, into this district, to spend their dollars that they enjoy Manhattan in doing. Whether it's relative to a sporting event or something at K-State or some other community event, Aggieville is an attraction, and we need to keep enhancing that attraction, or that attraction will fade.
Well, I'm still going to talk about parking charges as we move forward. I'm not done with that topic yet.
Yeah, I want to say that, you know, I'm all for the idea of the parking plan, big picture, looking at it, because we need one to manage what's happening, and we can work out, you know, the details, you know, later. But I think it's got to be, you know, it's got to pay for itself and maybe bring in some revenue. And then I think, again, that, you know, if there's concerns about businesses being hurt by the parking plan, of course, they shall have input to it. And we should be listening to that more than probably anybody else's input when it comes to that, because they're the ones that are going to be selling the product and collecting the sales tax and all that. So I think this is a good, you know, first step. The details are going to be tricky. I agree.
I think the fundamental decision for February will be whether or not to install devices. You know, the plan is one thing, so hourly parking and how many slots you have and how you configure east-west flow of traffic, one lane, one way, etc. But if you make the decision to install parking devices, then you really have a lot of options for timing and those kinds of things and testing over time. But again, fundamentally, the decision in February will say whether or not those devices ought to be installed right away, or whether we can wait until Aggieville itself begins to evolve some more.
And I think reflecting on the vision, reflecting on the investment we anticipate in Aggieville, creating an environment that would lend itself to being attracted to that investment, creating multi-story, multi-use in our Aggieville district, encouraging and attracting that development and that investment. I do think your parking management plan has a big part of how that is managed. For somebody to come in and invest in a multi-story, multi-million-dollar product in order for the parking to be managed in a way that accommodates their business, potentially their residents, and their office space. And that's really why we hire folks like Andrew and Walker to walk us through, because we're not the first community to do this. We're not the first community to take an area like this that's very attractive and put catalysts in place like a garage that could potentially bring this vision to light and more density and more investment take place.
Yeah, I guess my counter to that is we put the parking garage in, and the next 6 months is not going to yield very much. So making an investment in parking devices in the rest of Aggieville does not seem to be consistent with good business. So I just think that Once we get that parking garage in, we have to see kind of how it evolves. At some point, you may be exactly right. But the number of parking spaces that we put in that parking garage were designed to offload the street parking, offload the top of the park, provide equity for people that work in Aggieville so that they didn't have to pay full price and evacuate those spaces used by employees to enable customers more access to the store. So I think you have to let that play out. Making an investment of that kind early on just doesn't, I mean, I'm not getting it, so that's my opinion.
I'm going to say I've been to several areas in Kansas and outside of Kansas, as I'm sure you have too, where they do have paid garage and, paid everything. And then there are ones that just use it as a free garage and you can park there while you shop. And I don't know which one works better because I've never looked at their numbers. But I do know both of those types of districts have been busy, but I don't know what the prospects are on either one of those. But there are areas where they're free and they're robust, and there are areas where they have parking garages and they have to pay and they're still robust. But it depends on their population, who's spending what, and where they are located. And so that's always been in Manhattan, whether we're talking about airport parking fees or here, that's always been my thing, that we are talking about people who want to enjoy Manhattan, not make it too high in double digits.
So you can see, Andrew, that when you come back in February, it's going to be a great event.
Well, I'll leave you with this. To Jason's point, this is something that everyone that has a vehicle and has ever parked has an opinion on. And they're vast and they're widespread. Today was intended to start the discussion. I appreciate the opportunity to start this discussion with you. You provided some great feedback, some things that we need to do some more work on to be prepared to answer the questions that you have tonight about the costs especially, and we'll have those available for you in February. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.
I would like to add, if you have or could formulate some recommendations with regard to communications. It seems to me sometimes we fall down in not communicating well. We pass something, we expect it to work, and suddenly something blows up because we haven't been communicating well with the public or certain groups. So perhaps you have some boilerplate kind of recommendations you would have for that, so that with Mike's request about signs, but not too many signs, and but timing is important too, and sequence, phasing. So I think that is a critical piece, but it's way on down the road, but it is a part of this plan. So
It is, and it's an important
Yeah,
part
yes,
of the
it
plan,
is.
Commissioner, so we're happy to help you get
Yeah,
through
thank
that
you.
at
Great.
the appropriate time.
I think it's important.
Hey, thanks, Andrew.
Very welcome.
Have Ken next?
We'll have pizza coming. No.
Okay.
I'm just going to talk about and cover really the infrastructure piece because of the question that got brought up about how we're handling traffic out of the garage and so forth. And this is a good slide to start off before I turn it over to Ken. 14th Street now is has parking on 14th, and except for this block here, but it is only a two-way street. But the width of that street allows us to just mill and get my cursor going, mill and overlay 14th on down here to close to Fremont, and just restripe that and turn that into a 3-lane section. So it'd just be a 2-inch mill and overlay, and then we'll restripe it to be a turn lane. Laramie will be widened to 3-lane until we get into the garage, and then it will transition back to a 2-lane to Manhattan Avenue. And that allows us for the stacking and so forth for the traffic there at Laramie and 14th intersection. There is also a traffic light that's to be installed there at 14th and Laramie to control that traffic as well. So sewer, water, storm will all be replaced on Laramie to be all new because you got a new street. And to discuss storm sewer on the parking garage, That will all be put underground and flip and switched to, and put onto 14th Street underground. So when we're talking about 12th Street, there again, we all know about the water line. There's also sewer that crosses through the alley. We're going to replace that section of sewer so it's new underneath the new pavement. And then we also have new storm sewer. So everything underneath all the new pavement in 14th, Laramie, and on 12th will all be new under the ground. We'll also address conduits for Wi-Fi. If there's part of the parking management strategy too, is we'll need to make sure that we have conduits installed in certain locations in these, so they'll be brought to whatever they're going to go in the future whenever the rest of Aggieville is developed. So I'm going to turn this over to Ken unless somebody has any other questions. Okay?
Thanks, Mark. Ken Boone, Oxford Heron Hair, the Olson Studio. Good evening. I'm going to go over the exhibits that we showed at the public meeting that really start large, describe where we're talking about for our phase 1 projects, and then narrow down into really what we want to get to tonight, which is 12th Street. Because Mark had mentioned the infrastructure and the water line in specific on 12th, we really do need to move forward, we think, with some decision making so that we only have to address the pavement one time on 12th. And if we can do that by getting into the next construction season and have an answer to what we want to do on 12th, that will save us in the long run. So here is the district key map that we created that really shows a series of projects. Mark talked about 14th and the Laramie North Manhattan project, Project 2, or Project Area 2, Bluemont as Project Area 3, and then 12th Street as Project Area 4. I'm going to run through some of these quickly. Please stop me if you have any questions. So again, as we think about the district and we think about when are you in Aggieville, it's important for the character and quality to be reflected throughout, that the materials are similar and or the same as you get into the district. And so with 14th being one of our edge conditions, as you can see here, this is where we start introducing some of these materials, but we also want to introduce them on some of these edges in an efficient and cost-effective way. And so you start to get bits and pieces of those materials that will be more fully formed and at a higher level of amenity when you start to get to Morrow, you start to get to 12th, you start to get to North Manhattan, in those areas that are where people are going to be, so that we're spending dollars in the right places because we only have so much, obviously, per budget. So here you can see pavers and concrete used in unison, and then doing paver corner edges there. This is Laramie here, 14th here with the existing Burger King. We kind of rotate as we go to Laramie, east-west. Mark talked about the 3-lane section to here, and then we taper back down to the 2-lane. So again, we're introducing simple streetscape here that is high quality, but is maintainable and is cost-effective long-term until we start getting deeper into the district. As we get adjacent to the garage, we have the opportunity for some larger plaza spaces that these are really just connectors. Along here, we get a first introduction of available space for some trees and some landscape and some pots, and then a plaza anchored on the corner, and then we have storefront paving along here. Here is the alley. I'll address the alley in some slides later on, but know that we think the alley could be an important place. It could be an opportunity to create another destination in Aggieville, and we need as many of those as we can get. This is a Bluemont from Manhattan to 12th here, and so you see the consistency of the edge condition happening here. This is all existing in the median here. I think it is important when you start thinking about one-way, two-way, et cetera, that you do not have a full turn condition on 12th. It is median controlled to that degree, and so you know, the amount of flow coming here to the south is critical and important coming north, it's really just a turnout. So again, we have room, so you start to see the repetition of the quality paving materials here, landscape edge beds underneath that, and some street trees. You also start to see pots, and you start to see some fixed seating along those edges. And then we turn the corner. Sorry, these are all long. It's hard when they're corridors. We start changing directions. North is to the right on 12th Street. We turn the corner with the drop off for the hotel. This is in the location that they've indicated that is important to them. This is the entrance to their garage. And really this is just adding the paving surfaces, the enhanced paving surfaces adjacent to what they're doing, and the potential for a street tree on the corner. And then on the east side of 12th, same or similar condition there as well. We do know that there in the future, if redevelopment were to occur along this edge in Aggieville, then I think you would come back and relook at this edge here to make it more consistent with whatever else we've been doing on the streetscape. But now the existing drive cuts that are in there stay in there. We give them new aprons so we can clean up that edge and clean up the paving in the right-of-way, and we move to the alley. Mark mentioned the crossing of the alley with some infrastructure, and so the alleys are concrete crossings across here, and are one-way, anticipated to be one-way to the east, and then we get into really the section between Morrow and the alley on 12th Street that we've been spending our time, because this is really our first time to show people what the potential of what the rest of Aggieville could be when you start thinking about amenities, and you start thinking about what happens when we start adding streetscape amenities, we start adding street trees, we start changing paving, we start adding a higher level of finish and quality to the streetscape. This piece, and while all of these pieces sort of tie the thing together, this is that first hint adjacent to Morrow. We would anticipate that would happen south of Morrow here, and then obviously sets the tone for what we do on Morrow moving forward in later phases. So this is a very important piece as we move forward. Okay, I know you can't probably see that. Let's see if I can zoom in on that a little bit. I'm just going to read sort of this first part, because I think these summarize really well what we're doing with each concept. We have two concepts. Concept one that I'm going to show you keeps two-way traffic on 12th Street, removes parking on the east and west sides. That gives us 9 foot of paver sidewalk in front of the storefronts, and then it creates an amenity zone in addition to that of 10 foot on each side of the street. And so from the face of a building to the roadway is now 19 feet instead of the existing 9 feet that's out there now. So this is an important distinction on this concept, that the roadway is two-way and it is curbless, okay? And so in this concept, we have removed the curbs, and so the section really starts at the buildings and kind of tapers to the center. There are some technical reasons on storm water storage and some other things, but it also basically provides us with a way that if we wanted to close off either end from the alley to Morrow, you now have a plaza, an urban plaza that you can hold events in and everything else, and you don't have the obstruction of a curb anywhere within there. Now we will delineate with bollards, with landscape, and on paving changes, delineation of the lanes, delineation of where a pedestrian is, where a car is, et cetera. But it sets up a different condition in Aggieville than we have now, in that when you close it, you really have a plaza in that case. So let me go to the next slide. So when you look at what that might mean, you start to look at spaces that exist now like this. During the day, this is used for vehicular traffic, but at night, when they have high loads of people, It is curbless that allows them to hold festivals and everything else in this. And that's really what we're talking about, is that sort of seamless pavement surface. Now, they haven't done a lot to delineate the difference between where cars may be and where pedestrians may be. And in doing that, it feels much more like a pedestrian space. But we think some delineation is important in that case. And there's kind of a blow up of that along that area. This is also a curbless area here in another development where they also have similar rules to outdoor dining and et cetera. So you still put a rail up, but moving from storefronts over here as a central amenity and moving back and forth across that roadway is simply done. You know the pedestrian has the right of way in those cases. Let's see here. Next slide. Again, you start to see that same effect here as well, where you delineate with changes in pavement, using bollards, and then using landscape beds to protect the pedestrians, and they have changed paving there. So conceptually, that's where concept one is. We have, I think in all cases, when we talk about landscape, we talk about landscape beds, we talk about raising them up and not having them flat. For us, that's important because when you're doing salt and other maintenance on those surfaces, that wash into those beds can be really detrimental to long-term health of that stuff. And so we think that's an important piece on these concepts. And we're conceptually, we're showing them as limestone slabs as well to tie back into native material here. These are collapsible bollards. So there's been a lot of talk about, do we bring them in? Do we just bring sawhorses? What do we do to sort of close off a street? We have the option to do collapsible in the pavement bollards if we choose to do those. Those can be manual or they can be automatic. So what does that look like when we talk about it on the street? So building faced west side, building faced east side, drive lane. Remember, this is two-way. You see that you have on the west side, you have street trees. On the east side, you do not. You'll see in the 3D renderings, the reason for that is there is an overhead power line that runs along the buildings, actually runs right here, along the storefronts. And so we're not going to be able to really put anything that has any height over there without getting into constant maintenance and conflict with that power line. If that power line was under the street, that would be a different story. That issue has not been fully explored yet, but obviously undergrounding power has costs. So we have reacted, we think, in a responsible way of providing street trees here. We know we'll have shade from the building here as it comes around to the west. And so the solution for us here in providing seating areas and landscape beds out on these edges is to provide some overhead shade structures to reduce the sun, to reduce the sun and the glare on that edge as people are waiting to have dinner, lunch, etc. On their restaurants on the east side. And so you have, again, paving that slopes to the middle, paving that slopes to the middle. That gives us a nice triangle of water storage here in a high volume event. And then we can get it into the storm sewers and go. You see the edge, what would be a curb edge, but it's flat, and bollards on those edges, and then you see mid-block crossing, again, in an effort to sort of make that edge porous and encourage that idea of this is a district for people, and we want them to be able to move throughout the district. The speeds are pretty slow there, so anyway, that's why we have multiple mid-block crossings plus the ends as well. We do have room on both sides to accommodate outdoor bistro seating should they want to. And the flexibility of this design simply means that in this module here, if you have a tenant who wants to have outdoor seating, you can go down to some side pedestrian seating and a landscape bed, and your route sort of routes around that and makes it an active part of the streetscape, which we think is an important thing. You know, Kansas law requires you to have that edge around the outside of that to be able to serve alcohol And so we know that that's an important part of this, and so if we're gonna do it, we have to accommodate it. So in this case, you would come here, you would route yourself around this way and then come back out. So what we're trying to do is create a series of elements that we know are repeatable, that we can reuse on North Manhattan, that we know that we can reuse on Morrow if we need to, as those pieces of the streetscape start to flesh themselves out. But again, repetition of materials as we go through each one of those. And then some shots, some 3D shots that we modeled of that overall experience. Again, using native materials, using native plant material, using limestone, using pavers. We think you've got a 30-year streetscape out there that was done with some really good quality pavers. They've now faded, they've now started to break, they've done other things, but you got a lot of life cycle out of that. You could use a different material, but that different material is not gonna perform anywhere near as well as some of those pavers have sat out there. So we think the pavers fit really well with the building materials that are out there. We think you're gonna get really great life cycle off of them as well. And our recommendation would be, if we're doing paving material, we're doing concrete, or we're doing some kind of paver, and we're not in the middle with some kind of stamped concrete or any of that stuff. So here you see the looking north on the east side, you see the overview of the overhead structures here. Those aren't designed, those are a placeholder. We'll get into a lot more detail, but you start to see the impact of this overhead line on this side. There you can see the street trees across the street. Now you're across the street looking south, so you have a simple streetscape that goes here, and then you have amenity pullouts as you go that way. And then, you know, there's always a way to add an overhead structure, shade, light, you know, Aggieville changes from day to night, we all know that. And so lighting is gonna be hugely important in the way that Aggieville looks and feels as it changes from a daytime experience to a nighttime experience. And so here you can see overhead string lights through here. We'll have street lights, pedestrian lights, uplight stuff, so that the character at night is cool and interesting and great as it is during the day. Sort of run through some of these. Again, dining terraces outside, directly adjacent to the people. So this idea that outdoor dining and outdoor opportunity for people to be outside is really important to activating that street. When you have people out on those patios, it really activates the street and makes people want to be on that street. And we think that's an important thing, but it has to work operationally with what the businesses are doing inside. So in the end, it's how flexible can we be to work with the property owners and the businesses that if they want to accommodate this, we can. And so we've developed solutions that we can. They don't have to, but we think it's a great way to create a better street. And here you can see the bollards on the edge that define those normal edges. Okay. Get into concept 2. Okay, so concept 2 is a little bit different. Concept 2 puts the largest amenity area on one side. And that is largely because of the overhead power lines. Because the overhead power is there and it's so overwhelming on the street at times, we wanted to put all of that onto one side. And so really the sum is greater than the individual parts in this case, at least conceptually. And so we have 9-foot sidewalks maintained on the storefronts. And what we've done is taken the area we get back from reducing it to 1 lane south and no parking. And so we end up with a 27-foot wide amenity area that lets us do a whole bunch of different things that we want to do to activate the space, create a destination within the destination, et cetera. So with that, so what we're talking about is creating spaces like these, like this space here, like this space here, directly separated from a building by a sidewalk, okay? So this is new space gained in Aggieville that now is currently used for cars. is really what it's used for, either in parking or driving. And so conceptually, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a rich alternate environment in here. And you can see that there. You've got a street on this side, you've got a street on this side, which would be that street there. That the amenity is sort of directly adjacent to, you can activate the storefront, and then you can have an amenity as well. Oops. So here's what that looks like on the ground. On the east side, we have the 9-foot sidewalk with full paving materials. We've got limestone bench seating, and we've got landscape beds. We have pedestrian and street lights. We've got string lights, again, to create that nighttime overhead canopy. This is all on the east side, and then on the west side, you have a 9-foot sidewalk here, and then here is the amenity area right in here. This is a south one-way on 12th to Morrow. And so it's anchored on the end with a structure that has garage doors that you can roll up all of the sides. So that can be a community asset that you can rent out, you can lease out, or is always open. It could be a leasable space that is for a cafe, it is for a beer garden, it is for a very limited bistro, a wine bar, etc. It's new space in the heart of Aggieville that doesn't exist now, that is trying to, with a large outdoor patio, to activate this space and create another destination down there so people can see people in Aggieville using Aggieville. So that's what this environment is in here, is really that indoor space, and then the patio outdoor space. It has a bar, what we call a bar or laptop rail around the outside. These are stools, and you're facing outward. Okay, so again, you're an active part of that streetscape by enjoying what you're doing here. You've got a mid-block crossing that happens here. You've got seating and landscape that goes along with that. You have an outdoor game room here. So this would be a AstroTurf area. You've got a large farm table here. You've got a games locker here. You've got overhead lighting. This is big enough to put cornhole and some other outdoor games in, and really sort of create a casual open play space here. You can do the large Jenga on the table, whatever. And so anyway, it's a hangout space that you can do activities in next to it. And then we have, adjacent to that, we've got an outdoor living room. And so that outdoor living room area has seating in it. It has an alternate surface here, a decking, either tile or wood on this edge. It's got a seat wall that surrounds it, and then it has a focal point amenity, whether that's fireplace, art, water, whatever that is. There's something that sort of terminates that whole block of amenity on that edge. And this is really some conversation seating areas for people to hang out in. The longer they hang out, the more money they spend, the more comfortable they feel, the better they feel about the district as well. And it's not just going to bars and drinking, and it's not just dining. Sometimes they just want to hang out with their friends, and that's part of the space that is lacking in Aggieville right now. We know that. We've heard that a lot. Is we want to be down there, we want to be where the action is, but we want to have places to sort of hang out as well. Here's that nice green edge there to provide that softened edge from the street, and then you get to have these street trees. Because the amenities area is bigger, we got more room for soil, so we got more room for trees. So here's some quick slides of the 3D of this. Again, looking north, looking south, both on the east side. You can see the string lights, but you can also see the power lines above in the one lane there. This is the looking south on the west side. There you see the sort of the game room here, and here you see the living room portion there. Just a higher view where you can start to see those elements together. And then you see the structure, whatever the structure might be and whatever it might look like. The idea is that you can open it up and it can be seen in the weather when you can. The back door, the back wall is probably not a garage door because of services, and then it would open up into the outdoor area. There's another shot of the game area, mid-block crossing, etc. And then the outdoor dining area with the chair rail. So that's 12th Street. There's a lot there. Certainly entertain questions. I want to address the alley just a little bit, and we'll come back to you later with more conceptual information on the alley. We think the alley could be a destination. One of the things that we've talked about is to call it needs a name. So internally, we've been calling it Rally Alley because we think when we're drawing people in to Aggieville, they're there for several reasons, but one of them could be for rallies or other events. And so there are literally thousands of ways we can address that. But one of the important things is it's only 10 or 12 feet wide. Now it opens up by another 10 foot as you get back to where the Goodsense is, but the majority of it is 10 to 12 feet wide. So you can only do so much in there. But what the great opportunity is you have 4 surfaces that you can activate in that to tell a story or to show art or to do lighting or just have a fun place. And so people have dealt with that in many different ways. I absolutely love this one with the umbrellas. I think that is a destination alley that they have in a project, and everything else happens other places, but everyone walks down this alley. And this was in Union Station. I don't know if those of you who got a chance to see the Mylar sculpture that was in Union Station last summer, but this idea of creating a roof in a very tall, narrow space helps you manage that space better. And so when you think about a surface here above, even if it's light, that's a really critical part to making that alley feel like it's human scale. And then you can start worrying about what you do on this surface and these surfaces, murals, seating, et cetera. That's really narrow, but that's a really, really nice feel. So we think there's an opportunity there. We're gonna explore it further, but we think it's a really interesting place. We could create a destination within the destination that will draw people there. And by the way, we're parking a whole bunch of people right next to it. So if we can get them to Instagram there and do other stuff there, we think that's a bonus. And then some of the other stuff, I know the streetlights have question has come up previously about what are you doing about streetlights and site furniture and other things. So we are trending towards the idea of not fully historical, but certainly historical nod. But with quality lighting here. We know that the business district has told us that we're concerned we're going to lose our banners and our advertising and some of that other stuff. So we're selecting lights that will allow us to do all of those things on them. We really like this dual-sided light, but it may not be necessary. And so we'll get our way through that as we start to think about engineering, et cetera. But we think this strikes a nice balance between future and past, and will help us move through that. And again, high quality LED fixtures is really the critical part. And then bollards, you saw this is the non-movable and the movable bollards together. Okay, so with that, I'd be more than happy to entertain any questions you might have about the concepts and where they're at and where we're headed. Again, for us, it's in the timeline of moving forward, if there is any way to get to this direction or that direction on the 12th Street concept, because they're quite different. We understand that. We certainly would like to hear that tonight if possible. So.
I guess I thought when we, and maybe I'm mistaken, when we first started talking about 12th Street, we were talking about eliminating through traffic fully on it. Maybe not all the way down, because I know that we also had a conversation about commercial vehicles and their exit and entrance, but I guess I had always thought that block we were going to shut down through traffic.
Well, he can answer that better than I can, but it was actually, we were showing this stretch right here on the south side is the one that was going to be turned into a pedestrian mall with no traffic, not the north side of Morrow, be on the south side of Morrow, is in our concepts.
Okay, so that's a long-term concept.
That's a future concept, yeah.
Yeah, the design team, the designs team still feels pretty strongly about that as, again, destination in the destination.
Okay,
We explored that extensively, but being able to get deliveries into the garage and being able to get them to turn around, we
Okay.
just could not make that happen with this stretch.
okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure of that because I had, when we didn't even really discuss eliminating parking and or shutting down Morrow, even though that was what the majority of the respondents in the survey wanted to do, I got a lot of feedback from that. And so I went out to those people and were like, hey, Morrow is an iconic street. We don't want to mess that up. So we're doing it on 12th Street too. We're going to start there and see how it works. And so I like what's presented here, but I hope we don't lose that concept because I think that that was something that a lot of people were really, really excited about. So in terms of, that was really all the question that I had. So I'll just quickly give you the one that I preferred. Concept 2 to me is more intriguing just because my motivation, and again, I think a majority of the respondents to our survey's motivation was to eliminate as much traffic within Aggieville as possible. And to me, concept 2 does a little bit of a better job in that. I think discourages on some level with it only being a one-way traffic going through. My only question about that is, so like where that purple building is right there, I guess when you look at that block right now, either one of the businesses on either side could benefit very greatly from having a space outdoors where they could increase their dining. So how do we do that in a way that's fair for everybody?
Well, either one of them could lease that space as their outdoor dining, number one. Number two, you could decide that it simply needs to be a community asset that is managed, I assume the way you manage all of your other structures that are for lease or rent. And, so if you can imagine for parties or for parades and et cetera, and events, how important that might be from a leasing standpoint to lease it out to people to do stuff. You could do short-term leases as well in there. Again, it's a way to create revenue to help pay for the maintenance of things, and so that's one of the things we were thinking as well. And it's a totally different experience than what's out there now. Part of that is because it's directly on the street. The majority of the seat, there may be 12 or 15 seats inside. What happens outside is really the show, and you see this repeated in other districts that have a place like this, where they have a very modest structure that is what they serve out of, and then really what they're doing is they're activating the street with all of these people outside in their patio and et cetera. So it can take many forms, from coffee shop to beer garden.
Okay, yeah, so on initial concept, I think I like concept 2 a little bit better, just because, like I said before, my gut feeling is that it discourages traffic, and at least how it's laid out in the concepts that you presented there on what could occur in that new space, I just find a little bit more intriguing and exciting than I did in concept 1, so I prefer 2.
I actually like this one better too, but I don't want to advocate for it.
Understood.
Because in concept 1, I feel like we're treating the businesses on each side of the street the same, more fairly. This puts all of the outdoor dining on one side and puts the traffic in front of the business on the opposite side, and I'm not sure who's who, and it doesn't matter, but it is picking winners, and so I want to err on the side of being fair. That's why we build streets and have setbacks and so that we have order. And while I like the festival nature of things, I'm not sure about a public space that people lease for meals, or I just not interested in dealing with the merchants on the side that just gets the sidewalk.
Understood.
Yeah, see, I would go with concept one for a couple of reasons. One, you got those bollards there, so it can be closed off, makes this nice little plaza. And that would tie into that long-term plan of the other piece of 12th Street, if you wanted to make that a whole area. And so that's why I like that. I think, it's also a little bit more equitable to the people that might be leasing on either side of the street. And the third thing is, I really don't want to see the city get involved in managing any more spaces. Because that's something else will wind up on Parks and Rec, and we got enough already, so we don't need any more.
Yeah, I do like concept one. I liked actually both of them. I would rather leave it to the businesses to pick which one they like best. But I think concept one, I felt was more equitable in this sense. But I also like the Rally Alley, and I think that should not impact either one of these, right? Concept one or two. And as far, because I think that's I was really intrigued at the presentation of it and the possibilities of seeing that, even seasonally, what might happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's very innovative, and I liked all the concepts you showed with that. As far as the lights, I understand the issue with the banners. That's something I think we look forward to as far as advertising and use it for a variety of reasons. Are all of the lighting fixtures you showed solar?
No, they would be powered by line power.
Okay.
And they're
I thought I saw one of
LED.
them with like solar panels or something.
No, I don't. Some of the parking solution stuff had solar panels on them.
Okay.
But these lights do not. So LED. Yeah, they're LED. for
Okay,
sure.
it
Yeah.
just looked like there was,
Yeah.
like that top one
Yeah,
up
so
there.
those are actually that's actually light fixture there and there. And so what we wanted to show is you can do something that's very simple and neutral, modern, just as sort of street lighting, so that it just goes away. And you're not trying to spend resources on ornamentation that's high up when you're trying to light a street. And so seeing this structure next to that, that's exactly what they were trying to do, was to illuminate those surfaces efficiently and cost effectively without being in conflict with this.
Tell me about is it ballards, is that what you call them?
Bollards.
Bollards.
Uh-huh.
Oh, you said automatic and manual.
Yes.
So what does automatic mean? Do you push a button?
Yeah,
or what does
automatic would be
manu-
you push a button and there's apparatus, it's usually pneumatic, that has them go down, has them go up, operates. Or you can do, there are systems that are crank or turn to do the same thing, and those are all individual. And so the idea is, some historically have been, there's a bracket, and you take the lock off and you unhook it, but then you got to put it in something and take it away and hope that every time you do that, the finish of it isn't destroyed, it's not worn,
Right.
it's not tilted, all that stuff. So this is a way to just have them compress into the pavement. They go away until you need to use them, and then you raise them up to close it off for an event. Both concepts have these in them, so I think we're going to see that there are multiple areas in Aggieville as a whole, and in some smaller streets, that we should be thinking about being able to bollard them off so you can create event space that you want when you want it.
I agree.
And do that.
I think that there's so many little details we
Sure.
think about. I've just never really focused on that before. So I think, no, that's a good idea. But yeah, with concept one, mainly for equity reasons. Otherwise, I would prefer just the one-way traffic as opposed to two-way, in my opinion. But
Thank you.
Just a couple of things. When you're looking at the intersection of 14th and Anderson, when you're trying to enter that service station, on the southeast corner,
Yep.
we've got to be mindful of that. I mean, we've got shops in there. Once you turn that corner,
Yep.
and you've got another entry there, and then you're kind of boxed in. Because you can't exit as you get down towards the back of Arnie's, with a car anyway. So, I'd like you to think about that one.
Okay.
Then the other one is on, there by Starbucks, when you're now on Bluemont. You just have to be careful with any trees, because it's bad enough already. When you're turning in and turning out.
Sure.
We just have to be careful. The other one has to do kind of with the concept, and I worry a little bit about orienting this walkway north-south. You know, when you're east-west, generally speaking, you've got an entry from the alley to restock your store. When you're oriented north-south, the alley is up on the north end of this thing, and then you go down to Morrow. So maybe you could just remind me, I should know this already, but maybe Commissioner Reddy knows this because she spends some time down there, but can you kind of tell me what stores are on that segment right now?
Yeah, so we've got So Long on the corner, we got Tanner's across, we got Tagalucha here, and so here's the alley here. Here's Morrow right here, and so here's the entry here to Lucha, and here is another entry. Is this an exit? Okay. And this is like a shared kitchen door here, right here. So we've got 3 doorway penetrations on that side that are very active in their operation. What we don't have on the Tanner side is really any use of any of that edge by them currently. These are really on the inside of the building, our emergency exits, and there's a couple of door penetrations on there, but that's it. They don't use them for really anything at all except for emergency egress. They want everybody coming in here. They have a small patio out here, and then they have this is that really great patio there. So this is very active on this edge here. So that's why we think it's important to have area out there that's shaded for people to sit, people to wait, et cetera, et cetera.
You've got the same kind of issue with dumpsters too. They're gonna have to be somewhere.
Yeah, back here, in the alley themselves, yeah. Right now, that's where they currently are operationally. That's where they currently are operationally back here. So those kind of operational things don't happen. Those particular happen here. But, you know, we do have product loading and unloading and that kind of stuff that does occur. But it occurs in the early hours.
As you kind of look into the future here, that's one of the reasons I was oriented on east and west, because any growth in Aggieville arguably has to go east. You know, when we looked at this, Jason, when we're looking at 12th and then 11th and so on as we develop, you can't do that with this space. I guess you could turn the corner if you wanted, but if you were east-west, then you could just continue as the development proceeded, let's say a block at a time over 20 years or something. I do favor the option 1
Okay.
for equity and the reasons that have been expressed. And then I think if you had one-way traffic and you had one truck stop out there for some reason, you've got a big problem. And on the bollards, my experience with bollards is not very good. I worked down at Central Command and SOCOM, and those bollards, there's some danger in them, and they also don't work all the time.
Well,
So,
I
you know,
think that's a great point. These are completely different than the ones that you looked at
Okay.
from a security standpoint, from a force protection standpoint in controlling a gate or something like that. And so these are slow up, slow down, sort of operational when you want them sort of thing. But
just
you're
wanna
right,
make sure
sometimes
that
if it's
they're-
mechanical, sometimes it doesn't work and you gotta deal with it, so.
I just
no
want to
doubt.
make sure that they're, number one, strong enough, and then number two, that they are functional most of the time. And
Yep.
the ones I favor, you know, have the handles on either side, so you just lift them out of the hole. I take your point on getting them scraped up, but if you're paying a lot of money for a pneumatic system, we can probably get by with a little bit cheaper way to go about it.
Agreed. It's really operations maintenance, and you have the area to store it and the people to take them down and put them up, and secure them, because over time, you know, that can get loose. It is important to identify conceptually that there is a difference here. These bollards on the street side here those are permanent. There's no moving. They are permanent in the hardscape there. Where they aren't permanent,
These are just when you want the thing to be pedestrian versus vehicular.
correct. So these on this edge would always be there and they'd always be up. They're fixed. They're there to make sure the cars know there's a boundary there to protect the pedestrians, and it's to provide that level of safety. If somebody's looking at a phone and they off track, you know, they hit that thing. And so that's what those are for. On the ends, what we have is the ones that would be removable, right? And so you would just have them on this end, and you would just have them on this end, and then you could decide how you want to operate those, whether they're physically removed or automatic or manually. Right now, you guys use, you know, the sawhorse and the thing. That provides zero protection from a car that decides it wants to go through there, right? This will provide more protection than what that is now. If you want to create, you know, that kind of barrier, that's a totally different level of protection that you would need to create right there. And then I don't know that I would advocate that you need to do that. Number one.
When you're looking at traffic shedding too, I mean, when we looked at Aggieville before, we were contemplating maybe changing the direction of Morrow.
Yes, we did.
So when you're traffic shedding here coming from the south, you just turn west on Morrow under a new concept, or east under the old one. Unless it's daytime, in which you can drive straight through.
Right, that's right.
And then if you're coming off of Bluemont, for example, and coming south, you shed through the alley? Is that right, going?
If this is closed?
Yeah.
Yes, if you come this way, you simply turn down the alley. The alley is anticipated to be one way, and so you simply make that turn and you head south, or you head east down the alley. Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Are you factoring in the renovation or reconstruction of any of the alleys also?
You want to address that specifically?
The alleys, along with Morrow, all the other streets, are all future phases. Those were
Okay.
all looked at in the concept that was in the Aggieville Vision Plan last year. And as far as the alleys are not being addressed in this phase.
At all?
At all.
I would like for us to look at any new construction and having that entity help with the pavement of the alley and not put it as a burden onto the citizens through the general fund. I think that's how we do subdivisions, and I just think we have to be more attentive to that. The other thing about the alley there, I like the rhyminess of Rally Alley, but I also think that it would be better for us to think of something that's more eclectic. And I was thinking of those umbrellas, and whatever you pick, whatever the community picks. Because ultimately it would be Umbrella Alley or, some other
that's exactly right.
something.
Yep.
But I don't want to take one business's name and name it that forevermore, because that business may or may not be there forever. So, and it also gives kind of a different unfair advantage to that one business. So anyway, I want to be really fair to our local businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
All right. Well, thanks. That was terrific.
You bet.
I think what we'd like to do is hear from the public at this point.
Get there. Where we go?
So,
Thank you.
yeah. Anyone wishing to express an opinion on this issue, please come forward. We just ask you to sign in at on the roster there, and then let us know your name and address when you begin to talk. And remember, there's a 5-minute limit. You get a 30-second warning. Just we do this in order to make sure everybody has an opportunity.
Sure.
Well, I'm Cam Ward. I am proud to be an Aggieville business owner, and I'm proud to be an Aggieville property owner as well. I appreciate everybody's time in putting these concepts together. I think what's really, really important to start with when we focus on this is that we need to do what's best for Manhattan. We keep hearing from every entity about all these other towns. Lincoln has a population of 280,000 people. Lawrence has a population now of over 100,000 people. And so what's good for those districts, there might be some good concepts, but they're not necessarily good for us. I can't express enough how much conversation there's been with Aggieville business owners about the importance of free parking on those streets. With the garage, we're gonna have a lot of extra parking down there, but for businesses that primarily thrive off of students, coffee shops where someone's buying a $3, $4 coffee, they're not gonna even pay $1 to park. I mean, a student that is taking the money they have to buy coffee or go get something quick to eat, they're not gonna pay to park. We can't change infrastructure and just expect that consumer behaviors are gonna change right away. We have businesses that are closing constantly in Aggieville. We've had multiple ones close this year. Our property taxes are extremely high because our buildings are valued so high. I mean, I've got a 1,200 square foot storefront that I just got my tax bill for $9,200 for the year. And for the services that the city provides, I'm happy to pay it. And I want Aggieville to evolve. But what I want to focus on is what is good for consumers and businesses. And if we change infrastructure and it costs us 3, 4, 5 businesses that have to close because their business decreases, it's not worth it. We can't create this beautiful district and have all this wonderful on-street amenities and streetscapes and great parking, but not have any businesses to go to. And I would just implore all of you and the future commissioners, I know one of which is here tonight, to really think about what does it look like moving forward for business owners. We've been shown these ideas, we've been asked some opinions, we've heard about surveys that a lot of people have had opinions about, but when it comes to things as simple as do we install meters for parking, no one in the district is going to support that. And we've talked about it. We've talked about it at our ABA meetings, we've talked about it together. I mean, we've got business owners here that compromise, I don't know, at least 7 or 8 businesses in the district. And a lot of us could not survive if we make those big infrastructure changes and just expect that consumer behavior is going to change. So I would really implore all of you to think really heavily about keeping free parking on the street. Maybe that is some 30-minute parking that's free, so you can run into Varsity and get a donut or run into Blue Stem and get a coffee. But the conversation hasn't been how do we get our businesses to work with these changes? It's where else can we do business? Should we just do our business online if we're a retailer? Because there are some significant challenges to changing infrastructure and just expecting consumer behavior to change. As far as the general use space or the on-street amenities, I'd ask you guys about revenue from somewhere like Blue Earth Plaza. How much money does the city make from people spending time at Blue Earth Plaza? That's really more of a park and rec kind of thing. And if we create all this space with these benches and tables, people can't buy drinks in businesses there and take it out there, and sure, you can lease dining space, but those are gonna become picnic areas where families can come and enjoy the beautiful streetscape, but that's not money spent in the district. And if space is being taken up for that to happen, that's gonna be money that's not coming into the city through sales tax. It's gonna be money that's not going into our pockets so we can pay our property tax and we can pay our employees. So again, I think there's some really good concepts that I'm excited about. And you know, I've only been an Aggieville business owner for 2 years, but seeing the future is exciting. Don't kill our businesses in the process, because there's only so many of us that want to keep investing our money into this town when we see costs going up for our property taxes, cost of construction going up. So please, 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 and I appreciate your comments about, you know, Commissioner Reddy, about what you think about business owners, their opinions, paid parking not making sense during the day, Commissioner McKee, I mean, those things are real to us. So please, please, ask our opinions, continue to keep the dialogue open so we can make smart decisions for everyone and not just what's the best revenue generator for the city or what looks the prettiest. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, please?
Good evening. My name is Joe Gritton. I live at 303 North 14th Street, and I'm here to represent Varney's Incorporated, which owns the shopping center with Good Sense and Insomnia, Shaw Chiropractic, Hair Experts, and Quick Shop. And I spoke before you on August 10th with a couple of concerns about the parking garage, bit more physically about the parking garage, and how that affects the area businesses. One of my concerns was to make sure there was an alleyway between the parking garage and Rally House that allows access from North Manhattan to the shopping center. And really happy to see that that's in the concept. Really excited to hear about some of the ideas about making that a destination. Wholeheartedly support that. I know I've spoken with a couple other people that are associated with the area businesses, and some of their ideas, I don't want to go way off on that because I know that's not what we're about tonight, but just making that a destination, like doing something like a Snyder or Wildcat athletic timeline on the wall, and playing K-State historical audio over a PA system in there, and just making it somewhere where every time ESPN came in for a game, either a basketball or football game, they had a camera crew go down there, and you see that coming out of commercial breaks, just making it a destination. I mean, I think that's a win-win for Aggieville, a win-win for the whole area. So really like that. So, but my other concern back on August 10th was providing access from the parking garage to the businesses in that shopping center, to Good Sense, to Insomnia, and the rest of the businesses there. The manager of Good Sense estimates that 30% of his business comes from that currently owned parking lot where people park, walk in, get a sandwich, leave. Park, come in and get some cookies from Insomnia, and leave. So what I advocated at that time on August 10th was to make sure that there's some kind of access from the upper floors, some kind of stairwell in that northwest corner, because if you don't do that, you're going to have to, walk if you're not on the main floor, you have to walk all the way the length of the parking garage, go down the stairs, walk all the length of the parking garage, get your sandwich, walk all the length of the parking garage, and et cetera. So four lengths of the parking garage, you're walking just to get a sandwich. And the problem is people aren't going to do that as near as readily as they do if there is some kind of access in that corner. Rally House is an important business down there. I think that's a great idea to provide access from their second floor into the parking garage. But similar, 1/3 of that parking garage is adjacent to that shopping center. It's not just Rally House, and so there needs to be some kind of access from those upper floors of that parking garage down to the down to that shopping center. I know one of the presenters tonight had talked about being able to move I wish I had a map, but that southwest corner stairwell to the northwest corner, and so that's what I'd really like to see done in the final design. Just the garage, just because of what it is going to provide a physical, visual barrier from both Leavenworth, or from Laramie and from North Manhattan. And so I just try to mitigate that some degree, because there's no way around that. Providing access from those upper floors to that shopping center would be very much appreciated. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, yeah. Anyone else, please?
Good evening, Commissioners. Dennis Cook. I'm with Aggieville Business Association. I am not at this point speaking for the association or the board. We've had a lot of meetings, but just to give you just some overview of what we're hearing tonight. Number one, the garage is so important to Aggieville. It is the catalyst for the 10 years we've been talking about this Aggieville vision. It is the catalyst. It's the project that needs to happen. I think they've shown some great ideas of the work on 14th Street and on Laramie, and on North Manhattan in front of that. I think the design really works out well, and can't wait for that to get happening. The idea of the parking management plan, I think there's, I think, you know, that's a work in progress. I think we do need a parking management plan. You know, and I think maybe some sort of combination we could talk about, whether that's, you know, right now it's basically, depending on what time you park, it's 2 hours free until you get a ticket. And your timing, it could mean, you know, it could mean it's more like 3 hours or whatever. But we could also, in this plan, we could talk about something that says more like so much time free before you have to get charged. And I think there's plenty of time for us to figure that out. I think there's a combination in there that would really work for us. And then lastly, I guess on my side, I would just say on the 12th Street, on 12th Street between Morrow and Bluemont, again, speaking for me, speaking for some of the people I've talked to, not speaking as a board, but the concept that we've got the best feedback from so far has been concept one, keeping two-way traffic, keeping it kind of even on both sides. I think you know, the work they've done is great. I think there's some great concepts in that, but the feedback we've gotten mostly has been positive on concept one. So I appreciate all you guys' thoughts, and I'm sure we'll make the right decisions. Thanks.
Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate it.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Bill Varney. I'm the current chairman of the board of directors of a family corporation called Varney's Incorporated. And the Varneys have been in Aggieville since 1904. And so we have strongly supported Aggieville for many years and are still doing that. But we noticed that the purpose of this meeting was for some suggestions for the city administration to give to you, the commissioners. And in that regard, I want to refer to something that happened back in August when we mentioned some problems. At that time, we are pleased to notice that some of the things have been addressed, and especially this Raleigh Alley, except we're talking about a different area where Raleigh is the south side or the north side of a narrow area that leads from Manhattan Avenue up to the property that Varney's Incorporated owns, which incidentally is the area that's 1317 through 1331 Anderson Avenue. There are 6 tenants in that property, and I want to address only those who are on the eastern end of that property, namely Mr. Good Sense and the Insomnia Cookies and the Dr. Shaw chiropractor and the Hair Experts Hair Salon, because those are the places that have a south door that's right next to the city current lot and the new lot, a new parking garage. So when we look at the original amounts that we showed on the beginning of this meeting, you notice that there was a lot of attention given to the 5-story, not only a stairwell, but also an elevator right next to the Raleigh house. And it was open an area. And in one of the suggestions, it was shown on the ground floor that there would be 2 ways to turn as you brought your car in from West Laramie. One way would be to go to the right and go up and around looking for parking spaces until you got up to the roof. The other way was just to go almost straight ahead to a dead end, and at that dead end, which would be the northwest corner of the parking garage, there wasn't any sign of a door. And there wasn't any way for people to get into that parking area and through a door and right onto the area right next to the south doors of the 4 places I mentioned. Folks, that's terrible. The parking garage is for all of Aggieville. Why is our property being discriminated against? We're kind of the orphan area of Aggieville. That's because we're off in the corner. But it's not fair, and I know you hear that from children with a whiny voice. But the whiny voice sometimes has meaning. It's not fair to provide parking for all of Aggieville and yet have no particular easy way to get from the parking garage to Barney's property. So may I suggest from our corporation that one of the things that the city administration do and suggest to you folks is to provide not only a door on the ground floor between the northwest corner and our property, but also a stairwell. There's only 12 to 15 parking spots in that area right near that door, or the door that would be built. And then, if those are filled up, you're going to go into the process of looking for a parking space. And then so that, give me 10 more seconds, the parking space then is filled up with anybody else who wants to be on the ground floor. And so people who want to use our area will have to go up to the second or third or fourth, fifth floor, and they need a place that's handy, either an elevator or a stairwell down to that door that goes between the parking garage and our property. So this would be our suggestion, strong suggestion. Frankly, we're really kind of upset about not having an easier access. Mr. Gritton talked about going around, but we need to do something in that corner. And so may I suggest that that be the case? And even 87-year-olds can say it's not fair, but I'll try not to have a whiny voice. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Varney. Anyone else, please?
I'll try and keep my remarks short. Hello, everyone. I just noticed a couple of things that I wanted to address. It's really hard to follow all of these folks with their insights, but I guess the photos of the 12th Street images, the renderings that were shown, I guess the most remarkable thing for me was the imagery of the density. So you had so many 3- and 4-story buildings with these beautiful, just gorgeous displays. I want to live there. I think I live there in some ways. We just don't have the people down in this area. They just don't exist as of yet. So I wonder if we're not putting some of these amenities ahead of the actual demand. I believe there are 43 parking spots on 12th Street. I hear you, Mr. McKee, in your Commissioner McKee, excuse me, in your excitement to see reduced traffic. I think this is a really difficult one for me to navigate just because I feel like the people driving by my storefronts are the ones who make purchases. And obviously, when over half of my ventures have a sub $10 average ticket, any sort of parking fee would be not so palatable. So I understand that I may have to change, or I may have to close some of my ventures, but I just think that the district would be a less rich place in that effort. I would really like to talk about the parking ticket situation. Commissioner Butler, I love higher priced tickets. However, I think we can do it really, really smartly. I was recently in a ski area. I overstayed my welcome at this parking spot just a little too long, and I was worried. I thought that I was going to be out $50. It was the best parking ticket I ever got. There was no parking ambassador involved. It was a $0 parking ticket. It took nothing but technology. Technology, as I understand, we already own, that we can actually track who are the, let's call them bad actors in our districts who have multiple tickets. When I see a parking ticket on an out-of-state license plate, it hurts my heart, not just from a business standpoint, but as an ambassador of this community. So I think leveraging the technologies that we already own to, yes, give these 0 parking tickets, very much like a parking ambassador might do, but through the technology we already own and the 2 gentlemen who are handing out tickets already, I think that's wonderful. And I love the idea of an escalator. I don't overstay my parking often enough in Lawrence, but I know that the first one is 15 and the second one is 30 and the next one's 45. So they take that rather seriously. That's it. Thank you so much.
Did you mean an elevator?
An elevator.
Okay,
What did I say? Escalator. Yeah, similar.
just checking, thanks. Okay.
Escalating prices. Yeah. Anyone else, please? Uh-oh.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and members of the City Commission. I'm Dennis Butler. I'm the Director of the Riley County Police Department. As you've probably noticed, whenever there's been public meetings about the Aggieville redevelopment and specifically the parking garage, I've always attended these as much as I can to provide any input when it's requested, but also to stay abreast of the development plans. And so tonight, when I was watching the opening slides, I noticed the rendering of the parking garage and the first floor, what is now called retail space, and I didn't see any indication that that would now be also part of the Riley County substation that I've been led to believe would be part of this project. So I couldn't read it from where I was sitting, so I just clarified it with a member of staff that it's now being called retail space. So let me make a few comments that may sound like frustration, not unfairness, but frustration. Throughout this process, when this first started, I was approached by one of my staff. It's Captain Kyle, who mostly deals with staff on the garage and other development issues involving us, and said, you know, the city would like us to consider moving our substation over to the new parking garage. I hadn't seen a rendering of it at that point, and I said, sure, I'm open to that. You know, let's see how this develops, and we'll be part of the process. And throughout this process, as you know, it's evolved quite a bit, and tonight we saw more evolution, more discussion. And the space needs first offered was 1,000 square feet, then it changed to 5,000 square feet, then it was reduced to 4,000 square feet, and now tonight I don't see any square feet. And so I've been asked many times throughout this process, what would you like to do with this space? And as the space offers have changed, I've adjusted what I think we could best use it for. Trying not to plan for this space and create a financial boondoggle for the city or the county, but trying to be responsible and conscientious with the suggestions that I've made. So with these comments in mind, I think I've approached this openly, courteously, conscientiously, and professionally. And I just ask, as plans change, if that is a change, that this is no longer a space for us, to just give me the courtesy of letting me know before I come to a public meeting and I don't see it there anymore. So that's my request. Don't expect you to respond tonight because maybe there's reasons going on that I'm not aware of, that I'm not entitled to know. I just need to know, if you want us to be part of the process, what your expectations are, and we'll continue to adjust to those needs. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, maybe Jason knows, but I talked to Ron yesterday, and when I looked at the slide, it said commercial space. And the idea was to accommodate the RCPD in that space, so we'll have to sort that out on the side. But as far as I knew, on as late as yesterday, that was the plan.
And I think Mayor has been more engaged with staff than maybe the rest of us, so we haven't even had that conversation to know what to expect. So your raising the issue is important to inform us. Thank you.
Yeah, see, my assumption was it was gonna be in there, and the discussion really boiled down to how many square feet. And I don't know how big the current station is, I never measured it, but my assumption was it would be at least that big. And to me, it's essential that RCPD be in there, and the location's gotta be probably at the entrance exit, you know, because that's gonna help us with security and a whole bunch of issues, long-term. So that's always been a priority for me, so you know, it didn't bother me, it wasn't on the slide, because I just, you know, made the conclusion, the inference that some of that commercial space was gonna be the police department.
Anyone else, please?
But Mark Hattisall, 1206 Stacy Lane. I like the option number 1 on the 12th Street thing too, because I'd like to keep the 2-lane access traffic, and the weather in Kansas is bad enough that I don't think we don't need to commit a lot of space to outdoor dining, because there's only 5 or 6 months a year, maybe 7 if you put those heater things over, where people are gonna be wanting to stand outside and eat outside and stuff like that. So, just going back to beginning, the parking management thing, we'll figure that out in February. We need to have some free parking, and we need to stop having students park there. Whatever that balance means, I think that's the solution for the daytime parking. We'll worry about the evening later. Yeah, I would assume the police department has got to have their space in there. That just makes too much sense. And I think it's just an oversight of what they labeled those rooms, or that retail space, as that the police department has to be in that area. Otherwise, I like the idea of everything else. I think the parking garage, I think, has to happen, and you guys are on the right track. I think it's just, if they want some guidance, I would say option 1, and I'm not sure if that makes 3 votes. We'll see what Aaron has to say in a minute. But otherwise, I think they've done a great job here, and I do have to ask the parking garage guy off to the side one question, but I'll leave you guys to figure out that.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Anyone else, please? If not, we'll come back to the commission for closing comments.
I think that's the first time we had more than a quorum. Everybody from even future commissioners here. I think this is a good discussion. You know, we've been talking about this for years, and it's nice to see it coming along. And I think we agreed on several aspects, such as concept 1 and some of the other garage needs. I don't think there was ever an issue that we need more parking in Aggieville. That was never the issue. But from what I'm hearing today is also that sometimes it looks different, whether it's the business owners, whether it's the police department, and even as city commissioners, because the span in between each of them is so long that I forget what we had agreed to or what we thought about, because in between that we have so many other important discussions that we're having. And the biggest issue with this also is the sales tax. You know, it didn't pass, and we have to see what to do about that, whether that's next year or the year after that, however that might look. And while I agree to these plans, we need to be very aware of the timeline of these plans, because we do have other expenditures, such as the levies, such as all of these other things that we were thinking about earlier. But in concept, I do agree with these items that are before us, and glad we're having discussion. I wish the discussion memo was a little bit more lengthy, because like I said, I remember bits of it, but until, you know, Director Butler came up here and told me about the space for RCPD that was not even on my radar until it was referenced one more time. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think that is key to our discussion. We discussed having it there because it would be more convenient. So future discussions, I'm sure, will bring that forward. I'm not sure it was a typo or what the error or the discussion was on that piece. But I do appreciate the dialogue we've had tonight. I hope we gave enough information for you to move forward, but at the same time, future commissioners that are going to come on here are going to discuss this as well, and that timeline is going to look different because we do have a lot of items on our plate right now, and we don't want to commit as far as this is going to get done now and now, even though the garage is going to take up a couple of years and we're going to have the TIF district, but we don't have any revenue coming in right now. These are all just nebulous features right now until all of this happens. Basically, the hotel is going to go up sooner than later, and that's going to be a critical piece as a driver for some of these concepts that we're seeing tonight. So thank you for presenting this evening, and long discussion, but a good discussion.
Jason, can you comment, is the mayor's understanding of the his conversation with Ron correct? Regarding the police station?
You don't mean the conversation correct, you mean is the action correct, I hope.
The what? I thought you said you referenced a conversation as...
Did, but...
So that's what I'm asking. Okay. Now I see what you're saying. Not to call it, I understand. Has it changed since when Ron discussed it with the mayor?
RCPD's presence in the garage from a staff perspective has maintained itself as very important. The conversation about how much space has been in question. Conceptually, when we were at the pavilion October 23rd, we had roughly 1,800 to 2,000 square feet for the substation and another 2,200 square feet for training facility. The training was a reference to the potential for RCPD to use that space in the immediate future once constructed for operations. A number of different ideas that they've come up with for training. The use of that space for training has been commented on since October 23rd. Some of you may have received comments. I know our consultants have received comments, city staff has received comments just about that training space and what it's going to be. A lot of the reactions that we heard were just that potential for RCP to grow, have a larger presence in Aggieville, and some of the negatives that folks have in association with that. Most everybody that we have talked to understands moving the substation off of Morrow into the garage is a good idea. It's just a matter of how much square footage do we dedicate towards it. Okay. As at this point in time, I think conceptually we've had them, like I said, 1,800 to 2,000 square feet. I think that's going to be agreeable to RCPD. We haven't had the opportunity to really sit down with RCPD since the 23rd and talk about the training and whether or not that's a deal breaker. If they need it and it needs to be part of this substation, we just haven't had that conversation. So at this point, we took the training and just referenced the blue space as tenant or commercial space. It was never the intent to eliminate the opportunity for the substation, but recognize we didn't want to go as far as to go ahead and identify all that use as training and substation. So at this point,
I think that's fine. I wanted to make sure, at least from my understanding, there's an ongoing conversation, because I've commented on this before. I felt like throughout this process there have been certain aspects of it that have just dropped off after conversations have happened at other meetings. So I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't the case in this, that we had just decided that we were no longer going to do it. My second question is for you as well. So are we confident that the TIF, the revenue generated by the TIF district will cover the cost of both the 12th Street and the parking garage?
I don't know those costs right now. All we have for a TIF is a forecasted revenue stream. The one thing about the hotel being under construction and opening next year, the TIF analysis didn't anticipate that type of investment and return till year 4 or 5. And we're likely to see it in year 2. So we're going to be ahead of that type of projection. We need to get information back from the consultants as they deliberate through your guys' comments and the community's comments and reach a point where at some point, we're gonna have to make some hard decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, those images are great and concepts are awesome. They're expensive to do everything on them. So it may not look and feel exactly like what you've seen in those images in order to get them to an affordable rate. But the concepts are there, the ideas are there. We need reactions and feedback in order to then to now start building budgets. I know what, and you all know, what those budgets were when we started this. I can assure you they're higher right now than what we shared with you at the end of our last study. Things just start to crystallize and more options are available for everybody to react to. We need to get in a room and start dialing those back and show you exactly what a $10 or $12 million garage will be and a $2 to $2.5 million street and streetscape plan will be.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Jason. So one of the reasons why I asked that, and I know ultimately that's not something that we have hard numbers on tonight or are going to decide, but sometimes as a commissioner, I felt a little bit more like a horse being led to water than someone who actually has the opportunity to be able to prioritize things. And something that has stuck out in my head is if we don't have enough revenue to do both of these projects through the TIF district, in my point of view, I would much rather talk about streetscape and the improvements to 12th Street and leave parking as is than build a parking garage that then to have to pay for it, implement a parking management plan that could change the kind of the way that patrons interact with Aggieville and not really do any or most of the streetscape improvements that we wanted to do. So to me, it feels like the parking garage is 100% getting prioritized. And I would just hope if future commission comes to a point where they do have to make a hard decision between maybe one concept before the other to see how revenue plays out, that they're given the opportunity to do that rather than saying, well, we're so far along on this concept that we should probably just finish it, because I felt like we've been put in that situation several times throughout this. And the last thing I'll just say about Aggieville is I do think that we have somewhat of a responsibility to create a district that that maybe doesn't look exactly or caters exactly to what it is today, and think about what it might be in the future. And I say that to the comment on, maybe we're overbuilding from what's already there, but I think when you make opportunities available for people to live and play in that district, they'll do so. And I think we have seen examples of that with the multifamily buildings that have been built directly adjacent to Aggieville, who have been very successful and filled up very quickly. And so throughout this process, I think another thing that maybe we haven't focused enough on, and maybe it's because we're not quite there, is there's infrastructure improvements that we need to make, but we also need to start having conversations about how can we encourage the kinds of businesses that we want in Aggieville and encourage the kind of housing density that we want in Aggieville to actually be there. I think especially on Bluemont, there are some clear properties that do not fit in to the overall scheme of the district. And so things like how can we make sure, or how can we prod along with this infrastructure development and all these exciting things that we're doing, kind of changing in some ways the makeup of what Aggieville is today to what we want to see in the future. So sometimes there has to be a balance between catering to the current and looking to the future, and sometimes I think that a detriment to ourselves, we cater a little too much to the current and aren't kind of dreaming a little bit big enough, but I do realize there's a balance there. So obviously those are all decisions that a future commission will have to make, and I can't wait to come back in 2, 3, 4, 5 years and see an amazing, vibrant Aggieville that I can get to sit outside and eat. So good luck.
Yeah, my only concern, again, Commissioner Reddy already mentioned it, which is, how you're gonna fund this thing. And, I looked at the TIF, we don't have the sales tax. I'm not gonna vote for property tax to build this thing. So the staff needs to figure out what you can do. Now, I understand the water line's gotta be replaced on 12th Street. So clearly, we gotta put that water line in, so that means that 12th Street, you're gonna have to do something. But maybe not to build the whole thing, but at least phase in the pavement piece, because it's dumb to tear that up twice, clearly. So maybe there's some options there, and then I don't fully agree with Commissioner McKee on the garage. That's the catalyst. That's the whole reason we started this. And so, money's got to go into 12th Street because of the water line. But the garage is got to be built in some fashion. And so that means the majority of that TIF money probably has to go there. And that's the challenge. I guess we'll see some options in February.
Linda?
I think this commission is committed to the parking garage, and we adopted an Aggieville vision plan. And so we're just been inching up to it, and finally we're there, and we have to take some action. I kind of feel like we're long on the street and landscape and short on the parking garage detail, but that's tonight. So in February, we will be front and center with all the information. I do support the extra stairway. I think that we want, because that strip mall is there now, it may not always be there, but if building this garage is going to be there a long time. And so as we think about how Aggieville, or the edges of Aggieville can change, we need to accommodate that future growth also. So I would support that by way of feeding those businesses. And I want Aggieville to thrive. And so I think we're on a path. I want it to be as sustainable as possible. I think that's what we set out to do. At least that's where I thought we were going. So this finance discussion in February will be critical to whether it's sales tax, TIF, whatever, enterprise zone, whatever it, transportation development district. I mean, we have lots of options, it would seem. I don't know what can be done, but we'll know more then.
Sorry, I just have one more thing to add. I think either in late December, I don't know, maybe we have 2 meetings left, I'm not sure, before you step down, or in January even. Before February comes, I want to see a timeline of all of these projects. I don't want to see them individually at a time. I need to have a comprehensive idea of what our plan is as far as revenue, or where are we getting the sales tax, or what are we going to do now that it didn't pass, because there was a lot in that sales tax, and because it didn't happen, instead of seeing these isolated and committing, I'd rather have a full discussion, a lengthy discussion about a plan. What are our options? We don't want to go skyrocketing into debt because we've committed, and I don't think that's what our community wants us to do either. If we're talking about the levee, the North Campus Corridor, the airport, Aggieville, all of these are important priorities. But where do we fall as a city commission? And what are the revenue sources? What are our options? What is it we absolutely can't do? What is it essential that we absolutely must get done, like the levee? I need to see those items in a timeline of some sort before, like I said, before we start committing, because we commit with good intentions. And we want to fulfill those intentions because it is good for Manhattan. But at the same time, we need to be realistic about our revenue sources. And we can't.
I requested the same exact thing from the city manager, and Mayor, this is your opportunity to question if my conversation with him was real or not. But he said that was the goal for goal setting, your goal setting meeting, so yeah.
I said I wanted to see it a little bit, because I didn't want to rush it right after the
For
sales tax
sure.
were done, but the new commissioners coming on, I felt like that needs to be a discussion we needed to have. But because we keep referencing February, I don't want us to forget all of this other stuff that we need to be thinking about.
I had the same issue, and I've talked with the city manager too, about the need for the commission to start talking about what are we going to do with these projects and the money that we're going to have to, what they're going to cost. Instead of each meeting being fed, oh, here's a project, and here's a project. And that's how I mean, we've only had 2 meetings, so it's not like it's gone on a long time, but I could see it going on a good long time. So I think the sooner we have that discussion, and I don't know about goal setting. I'm not so sure that goal setting is the time for us to have the discussion. Goal setting is after we've settled a few things and can then weigh what are our priorities.
Yeah, I talked to Ron on Monday about that as well, and what we agreed on is we'll have a timeline that'll have the projects on there will also have things like the question of the ED tax extension, and we'll have the reduction of the debt on there, which, as you know, from the South Manhattan project, starts to come off in 22, 24, 26, and we would include the temp note space between anything we did and adopting new debt. So I don't know, we didn't quite agree on the timeliness of that, but obviously the sooner the better, even if we laid it out in kind of a overview form to get started. So, and then on this issue, when we talked about TIF before, I think we had between, of the 31 million we needed for the whole thing, we had between 15 and 17 in TIF. And right now we have the hotel under construction. We've had construction on Bluemont on both the western side of the, the eastern side of the hotel, the northern side going up Manhattan Avenue, the southeast corner of Laramie. So a lot of good things are happening. And then the garage would just add to that. So, I mean, I just see this as maybe giving further credibility to the already conservative estimate on TIF. But I'll leave that to Jason. So I also support a northwest entry and stairwell. I think when we were talking about the garage design, we already had an idea that that might be an add. So, you know, if you visualize how that looks, in other words, you come down that stairway, you've got doors opening, and you've already got an expanded space in addition to that 12 feet that comes in off of off of Manhattan Avenue. Then when you get back behind Mr. Goodsense, it widens. So arguably, you've got something even better right there in that kind of, I don't know what it is, probably 30 by something in there, that we could do something really great back there. So, all right, so Mark, does that kind of get you down the road where you need to be? And
Mayor, let me just mention one other thing. As I thought about K-State's parking garage and the backup of traffic at 8 o'clock in the morning, clear down on Anderson and around that, there's a light there, it's pedestrian light, and what happens at Starbucks, I'd like to be sure that we factor in stacking into this parking garage, and I don't expect an answer tonight, but it just occurred to me that given the location, coming east or west on Laramie has the potential to be a traffic issue. So, and I know you're planning a light, so maybe you're already there.
they've
But
already
we
got,
haven't.
remember, it's a third lane was added too, so.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we need to think about that harder.
Okay, so Mark, did you get everything you needed?
Yeah, we're good, thank you.
Jason, same? Okay. All right, well, we really appreciate the input from the public on this. Great discussion with a lot of detail, but more to come in February and before. So thanks, everybody.